Chapter 1002. After saying this, Chen Zhu seemed to feel that he had said too much, so he scratched his head in embarrassment. When Yu Qian heard this, he still had a smile on his face, but he had become a lot more pragmatic. This shouldn't be. I heard that the matriculation camp's requirement is to provide enough food. How can there be a lack of food? Heard? Chen Zhu looked confused. It's not that I heard, but it's the rule. To be honest, Brother Chen, I'm actually an investigator. I'm here to see if there's anything you're not satisfied with. I'm here to solve your problems. Just like the lack of food, we'll solve it. Yu Qian knew that he had to give him some solid information, so he spoke as if he was an officer. That's what I said, brother. Your bearing is different from us commoners. Chen Zhu had an as expected expression. Since he knew the other party's identity, he did not hide it anymore and told him about the lack of food given by the higher-ups. In the end, he added, Brother, you saw it just now. My son is growing and has a huge appetite. My wife had no choice but to save some food for them. Then again, being able to eat 7 full meals is already very satisfying. This is something I didn't even dare to think about before. When Chen Zhu said that he was satisfied, he really did not mean to blame him. In the past, he could not even eat 7 full meals. However, the same words had a completely different meaning in Yu Qian's ears. Yang Chendong had just told him that he wanted the Han people to be rich and to be superior. This was also the reason why he kept conquering new territories and snatching more resources. But now, they could not even fill their stomachs. How could they talk about wealth, dignity, and being superior? Yu Qian left. When he left, Chen Zhu was still thanking him for the half-pack of cigarettes. Other than the loveliness of the commoners, they did not have high expectations. When someone did them a favor, even if it was just a drop of water, they would still thank them for a long time. After leaving the Han matriculation camp, Yu Qian's expression became completely serious. He looked at his assistant and said, Send someone to check what's going on with the food problem. Remember, it has to be done in secret. Don't let anyone find out. Yu Qian's worries were not unfounded. Although Chen Zhu's eldest son could eat a lot, which led to the lack of food, he did not think that this was a special case. If it was really as Yang Chendong said, and there was enough food, how could such a problem occur? Only 5 days later, the assistant had investigated the matter thoroughly. The city lord's mansion had elite manpower and many information channels. When they had any requests, the Security Bureau and the CIA could mobilize some of them. The city lord's assistant personally came forward and investigated the matter in just 5 days. Then, the report was placed on Yu Qian's desk. When he finished reading it carefully, he immediately slammed the table and cursed. According to the report, the Han preparatory camp did indeed have a problem of illegally withholding food. However, because the amount was not much, only 20% was deducted per person. In addition, the Han people who had just arrived were more honest. Even if some of them did not have enough to eat, they would not tell others. This problem had never been exposed, and no one questioned it. The report also said that the person in charge of this matter was the Vice Minister of Civil Affairs, Yan Xiao, and the Vice Minister of Public Security when they had planted a lot of spies in the camp. Once they found out that someone had come to investigate, they would immediately come up with a plan to deal with it. With their men around, it was difficult for the people to even have a chance to speak. This time, if Yu Qian had not used an ordinary person's ID of the preparatory camp and not the special pass issued by the city lord's mansion, he would have attracted the attention of others as soon as he appeared. Then, they would not have been able to find out anything. How long ago was that? Yu Qian sat on the chair, panting heavily. He looked like he was very angry. My lord, it has only been 2 months. The assistant was afraid of being implicated, so he carefully replied. Hearing that it had only been 2 months, Yu Qian breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, this proved that the Han people who had left the matriculation camp before had not been exploited like this. Otherwise, once those people had left and been assigned to different areas, it would have been difficult to make up for it. However, even if it had only been 2 months, Yu Qian could not tolerate the existence of this matter. Although it involved the two vice ministers, he still had no intention of backing down or lifting a finger. Since Yang Qindong trusted him so much and gave him the authority of Resin City, he must take his salary and do a good job. Otherwise, he would feel sorry for himself. How about this? Send this document to Bugnam of Gojoseon in the palace. At the same time, report to Bugnam of Gojoseon that I'm going to deal with the two vice ministers. Reporting to Bugnam of Gojoseon instead of reporting to Yu Qian for approval meant that Yu Qian had made a decision to deal with the two senior cadres properly instead of just reporting the conflict to Bugnam of Gojoseon. Yu Qian was holding back his anger and wanted to properly deal with these two vice chiefs. Although these two were promoted to their current positions, and he had also raised his hand to agree, this did not prevent him from punishing these people for their crimes. Since there was a problem, he had to deal with it. Only in this way could he clean up the mess. Otherwise, if a cadre made a mistake, he would not be able to intimidate others. He had already decided to denounce the cadre and was even prepared to remove him from his post and investigate him. However, what Yu Qian did not expect was that just 3 days later, there was a sudden movement in the palace. A large number of Longwei were sent out. They bypassed the Ministry of Supervision, the Ministry of Anti-Corruption, and even arrested Vice Minister Yan Xiu of the Ministry of Civil Affairs, and Vice Minister, one of the Ministry of Public Security. Not only that, the head of the Ministry of Civil Affairs, Minister Zhou Hua, was also taken away from his office that afternoon. It was said that Minister Zhou was being wronged when he was taken away. When Yu Qian sent people to investigate, they did not find any problems with Zhou Hua. Yu Qian was very satisfied with this person who was recommended by him. However, he did not understand why this person was implicated. Could it be the responsibility of a leader? But if that was the case, why was Minister Long Tainan of the Ministry of Public Security not arrested? Within a day, a minister and 2 vice ministers were taken away from their offices. It was even done by Longwei. This inevitably caused a lot of discussion among the subordinates. Many of the leaders were anxious and felt that they were in danger. Fortunately, Yang Qindong's actions were always clean and efficient. On the second day of the incident, the Lord of Chisin City, Yu Qian, the Minister of Supervision, Xin Yu, the Minister of Anti-Corruption, Wu Qian, the Minister of Public Security, Long Tainan, and the Vice Minister of Logistics, Yin Qingba, were called to the palace. This was obviously to give an explanation for the arrest of Zhou Hua and the other 2. These high-ranking officials all rushed to the palace nervously. Everyone was extremely nervous. For example, the Lord of the city, Yu Qian, was recommended by Minister Zhou Hua. He was guilty of using people inappropriately. Xin Yu and Wu Qian were the 2 leaders in charge of the cadre issue. Naturally, they were guilty of incompetence. Minister Long Tainan was the direct leader of Wanan, but the last one was Yin Qingba. He was only the Vice Minister of Logistics and was only responsible for distributing food. He only had a working relationship with Yan Xiu and the others. Could it be that he also made a mistake? For a moment, everyone looked at Yin Qingba with a strange look. Even he himself was at a loss. He was very sure that he was not involved in this matter. He had no personal relationship with Yan Xiu and the others except for his work relationship. He really couldn't understand why the 6th young master called him here. With his rank, it seemed that it was not enough. No matter what thoughts they had in their hearts, in the end, everyone gathered in a courtyard of the palace. Longwei's figure was everywhere in the vicinity. It was heavily guarded. In the courtyard, only Yang Qindong was sitting on a chair. Beside him stood the inseparable servant Beta, Persei. As soon as everyone came in, they saw that there were only 2 empty chairs beside Yang Qindong. For a moment, everyone was silent. The atmosphere was so tense that they didn't say anything other than calling him the 6th young master. Among everyone, only Yu Qian was still stubbornly calling Yang Qindong Bugnam of Gojoseon. Perhaps this was his insistence. He insisted on using the official title of the great Ming dynasty Yang Qindong to show that he still had feelings for the great Ming dynasty. Although his heart had long been on Yang Xia's side, he had no intention of changing the title. Yang Qindong also had no intention of correcting the statement. After seeing Yu Qian, he politely stood up and pointed to the chair beside him. "Castellan Yu, please take a seat here." "Thank you, Bug Nam of Gojoseon, for giving me a seat." Yu Qian didn't stand on ceremony. He liked to be straightforward. If it was something that belonged to him, he wouldn't refuse. After Yu Qian sat down, Yang Qindong looked at the remaining people. Then his gaze fell on Yin Qingba. "Come, Vice Minister Yin, come and sit down too." "Ah." He didn't expect Yang Qindong to call out his name. In this environment where he was the lowest in terms of age, seniority, and position, Yin Qingba was a little overwhelmed. He just instinctively shook his head. Beta Persei, who was at the side, had already understood. Seeing that Yin Qingba was still shaking his head, he walked over without saying a word, pulled Yin Qingba over, and pressed him down on the only empty chair. Yin Qingba felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He tried to get up several times, but Beta Persei's arm was so strong that he couldn't move at all. Until Beta Persei saw that he was still struggling, he whispered in his ear, "The sixth young master asked you to sit, so you sit. This is an order." Hearing the word order, Yin Qingba finally calmed down. Speaking of which, a vice minister of logistics in the Castellan mansion also had a lot of power. In particular, logistics had always been the place with the most benefits. Because of this, many people begged him. Yin Qingba had also seen some of the world. If it weren't for the fact that the people who came today were too high-ranking, he wouldn't have become so nervous. Chapter 1003. Yu Qian and Yin Qingba sat down, and the scene quickly became quiet. Yang Qindong, who was sitting in the center position, finally spoke. "Today, I called everyone here to give you an explanation regarding Yan Xiao and the other two. At the same time, I also want everyone to give this king an explanation." Finally, they were talking about serious matters. The small courtyard was silent. Under Yang Qindong's signal, Beta Persei behind him took a stack of signed manuscripts and handed them to everyone. "You can take a look. This is the testimony of Yan Xiao and Wanin. After interrogation, they confessed to embezzling the food from the Han people preparation camp. After investigation, the food that was embezzled from their hands was eventually transferred to the market. A total of 28,000 taels of silver was ultimately split between the two of them. When the matter reached this point, everyone in the courtyard took a deep breath. 28,000 taels of silver, split equally between the two of them. That meant that each of them would get 14,000 taels of silver. This had already exceeded the maximum limit of 10,000 taels of silver. Needless to say, they would definitely die. Everyone's reaction fell into Yang Qindong's eyes. Even though he knew that these people already knew what he meant, he still said, "Due to the seriousness of this case, this king has decided to carry out the execution in front of the central square of Crimson City in 3 days. At that time, all the big and small departments in Crimson City must go and watch. If the other officials have nothing important to do, they must also be present. Does anyone have any questions?" No. Knowing that Yang Qindong wanted to use this matter to intimidate the other officials, everyone nodded in agreement. "All right, if everyone has no questions, then we won't waste time on these two vermin. Next, let's talk about the other people and your problems." After investigation, the Minister of Civil Affairs, Zhou Hua, was aware of this matter. Although he adhered to his principles and did not wallow in the mire with Yan Xiao and the others, he clearly knew about it and did not stand up to stop it for the sake of the so-called harmony between colleagues. This is the crime of inaction. This was the first time that everyone had heard about the crime of inaction. For a moment, everyone was puzzled. Yang Qindong quickly gave them an answer. In this prince's opinion, there are only 3 types of officials. The first type is a problematic official. They either abuse their power for personal gain or take bribes. Such an official is called a bad official. The second type is someone who sets an example for others and works diligently. Such a person can be called a good official. But at the same time, there is also the third type, which is a monk ringing the bell every day and muddling through life. Adhering to the idea that things do not concern them, they will not stop or participate in anything wrong. They only want to live a stable life. These are the officials of inaction. When they have a problem, this prince calls it the crime of inaction. Zhou Hua was such a leader. He had noticed some disgraceful actions of his deputy, Yan Xiao, but he didn't stop it. He didn't point it out, and he didn't report it either. He just let the situation continue to develop. What was the difference between such a person and an accomplice? Receiving such a high salary and enjoying the halo of being respected by others, but not doing what he should be doing was also a sin. So this prince has personally chosen 50 mu of good farmland outside Qiqian City for him. In the future, he can obediently go and farm. There is no need to consider other people's feelings. If he grows well, he will have more. If he doesn't grow well, he will have less if he is lazy. This prince feels that this is very suitable for him. A crime of inaction had actually turned a high-ranking official back into a commoner. This kind of punishment couldn't be said to be light. For a moment, Yu Qian and the others' faces were flushed with shame. But at the same time, they had a deeper understanding of Yang Qindong's attitude towards officials. That was, since you were in this position, you had to do the work that this position should do. If you wanted to be lazy or even want to do nothing to muddle through, it was clearly impossible. Zhou Hua's matter was thus settled. Following that, Yang Qindong criticized Xinyu, Wu Qian, and Long Tainan. The first two were in charge of the self-discipline of officials, but they didn't notice the corrupt official in front of them. This was a dereliction of duty and negligence. For this, they were fined 2 months of salary. Long Tainan, as the direct leader of Wan'an, was also guilty of negligence and was fined 3 months of salary. After making these decisions, Yang Qindong looked at the three and asked, "How is it? Do you have any objections to this kind of punishment?" "No," the three said in unison, although they were indeed somewhat wronged. After all, there were so many officials in Yangxia, especially when there were several provinces that needed to be monitored. It was impossible for them to take care of everything. However, even Zhou Hua had been stripped of his official robes because of his crime of inaction and had become an ordinary farmer. So what if they were fined a few months of their salary? The three didn't have any objections. Yang Qindong looked at Yu Qian and said, "This matter, City Lord Yu, has both merits and faults. Because of your merits, this king has arranged a chair for you. After all, without you, this matter wouldn't have been exposed so quickly. But at the same time, the person who recommended Zhou Hua was you. You are obviously guilty of negligence, so this king will punish you with half a year of salary. Do you have any objections?" Yu Qian had already stood up. He was always righteous, but at this moment there was a trace of sweat on his forehead. This minister has no objections. Bugnam of Gojoseon did the right thing. Good, the punishment has been given. As a person who has done a meritorious service, you should continue to sit down. Yang Qindong's voice was full of concern as he said, there was no other way. At the beginning he had set a rule. If there was a problem with the person who recommended the person who recommended the person would be jointly responsible. Seriously speaking, only penalizing Yu Qian with half a year of salary was the lightest punishment. After everyone's questions were asked, Yang Qindong's eyes finally fell on Yin Qingba. He said, "Vice Minister Yin, this subordinate is here." Yin Qingba hurriedly got up. His face was full of anxiety. After listening for a long time, he still couldn't figure out why he was here. If he was guilty, he should be standing. But if he was meritorious, where was his meritorious service? Seat, you are a person who has done a meritorious service. So this king bestowed you a seat. Everyone else is the same. I hope that the next time you see this king, you can all sit down and talk." Yang Qindong gestured for Yin Qingba to sit down again. He didn't forget to use this matter to remind Xinyu and the others. These words caused the three people to nod in unison. Feeling that he had already reminded them, Yang Qindong returned to the main topic. He looked at Yin Qingba and said, "The reason why I said that you have done a meritorious service is because a while ago, someone privately came to you to sell food to you, but you bluntly refused. After that, you wanted to find this person, but you didn't have any clues. Is that right?" "Ah, how did the sixth young master know about this?" Yin Qingba was stunned by these words. There was indeed such a thing. After all, he was a vice minister in charge of logistics in the city, Lord Manor. He was in charge of the issue of food distribution. Because of this, someone wanted to sell food directly to him, but he refused at the time. After that, the more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. He thought that this matter must involve something, so he wanted to find the person who came to him to find out the truth. But with his power, it was difficult to find that person. He also suffered from no evidence to prove the existence of this matter. He also had no way to report to the Ministry of Supervision and the Ministry of Anti-Corruption. In the end, he could only not find out. But he really couldn't understand how Yang Qindong knew about this matter. Facing the confused Yin Qingba, Yang Qindong quickly gave him an answer. "You don't have to think too much about it. The person who came to you was sent by Wan and a vice minister of the Ministry of Public Security. He didn't want to expose himself, so there weren't many people who could find out about him." This explanation made Yin Qingba immediately understand what happened that day. He immediately said with an ashamed expression, "Sixth young master, this subordinate is also responsible for this matter. If it wasn't for the lack of evidence and the fact that I couldn't report to the relevant departments, I would have done so long ago. Perhaps the matter at the Han People Preparation Camp wouldn't have been delayed until now. No, this isn't your fault. You used your actions to prevent worse things from happening. I'm afraid you don't know. Originally, Yan Xiu and Wanan were prepared to keep more food, but because they couldn't find a suitable place to sell it, they could only sell it in small quantities in the city. That's why they only kept 20%. From this, it can be seen that you are already a person of merit. This king also sent people to investigate. When you were the vice minister of logistics in the city Lord Manor, you did everything by yourself and were a righteous person. Yes, as a reward, you can be the minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs. Directly promoting a vice minister of logistics in the city Lord Manor to a minister was not as simple as being promoted by 3 ranks. This decision also stunned everyone. This was because everyone knew that there were 3 vice ministers in the Ministry of Civil Affairs who were quite capable. They were also righteous in their work. Logically speaking, they should have been strong candidates for the minister position. Now that a vice minister of logistics in the city Lord Manor was suddenly demoted to the position of minister, wasn't this a blow to their morale? As if he saw through everyone's thoughts, Yang Qindong said, "A single matter in the Ministry of Civil Affairs caused problems to the minister and vice minister. As their colleagues, the other vice ministers are also responsible for their negligence. Not promoting them is a punishment for them. If anyone has any objections, they can come directly to this king. This king is willing to have a good talk with them." When he said this, he expressed his dissatisfaction, but at the same time he also had the intention of conjugation. Conjugation was most famous in the Qin dynasty. It was first introduced by the famous reformer Shangyang. It meant that several households were conjugated. If one person had a problem, everyone would be guilty. This kind of policy had its advantages and disadvantages. The advantage was that when something happened, everyone could think of the role of supervising each other. The disadvantage was that it often involved the innocent, and in the end, it forced the elderly to become the bad guys. Yang Qindong was well aware of the advantages and disadvantages of this. So when he talked about conjugation, he didn't use it so seriously. He didn't punish or promote so that it wouldn't make people panic. Chapter 1004. After these words and decisions were made, everyone praised Yang Qindong's political wisdom in their hearts. At the same time, they also became more cautious. In the future, they needed to be more serious. Not only did they have to be righteous, they also had to influence the people around them to be righteous as well. Yin Qingba, who was called out, felt as if he had been hit in the head by a big pie. At this moment, he was so excited that he didn't know what to say. As usual, he could only tactfully decline and say, "Sixth young master, thank you for your high regard. However, I feel that there are still many things that I need to learn. I'm afraid that I can't do a good job in such an important position as the Minister of Civil Affairs." Yang Qindong smiled in satisfaction at Yin Qingba's modesty. However, once the appointment was made, it would not be easily changed. Modesty is good, but excessive modesty is not good. The position of minister will be given to you. As long as you have the people in your heart and work seriously and responsibly like the Vice Minister of Logistics in the city, Lord's Mansion, there is nothing that you can't do well. Then this subordinate will listen to the sixth young master. Seeing that he had said what he needed to say, Yin Qingba's excited heart slowly calmed down, and he accepted the task. "Haha, all of this is thanks to City Lord Yu. It was you who recommended another talent to us." Yang Qindong smiled and patted Yu Qian's arm. Then he looked at everyone and said, "This king will not be stingy with what I can give to everyone. However, you should not take the things that you should not take. If anyone takes it, then be prepared to be severely punished. Only when the officials are upright can good policies fall on the heads of the people. As long as the people are satisfied, then we will be able to stand firm and go further. Any official who doesn't take the common people seriously, the common people won't take him seriously, and this prince won't take him seriously either. These words are for all of you here, and I'll have to trouble you to pass it on to your other colleagues." "Yes, we will remember." Yu Qian also stood up and solemnly promised Yang Qindong. "Then I hope that the next time I see you all, you can sit here instead of standing." Yang Qindong expressed his hope with a simple sentence. In order to have a seat when they meet the sixth young master, the other officials naturally tried their best to perform well. After the incident with Yan Xiao and the 10,000 times came out, everyone once again saw the sixth young master's determination to run a clean government. To be honest, it was a little harsh for the two powerful vice chiefs to be publicly beheaded just because they had embezzled more than 10,000 taels of silver. Even if they went to earn a salary and other benefits, they would be able to earn it in a few years or more. The treatment that Yang Xie gave to the officials was quite good. This was especially true after the implementation of the ticketing system. Those ticketing tools that were issued on time every month could be exchanged for high prices without having to take them out. It was precisely because the treatment was too good that if they made mistakes again, the risk and capital would be too high. As a result, the number of officials who became Yang Xie officials in the future was much lower than any other power. Zhou Hua was removed from his official position because of the crime of not doing anything. The response was even more enthusiastic. It turned out that not being greedy and not doing things was not good in Yang Xie. Yang Qindong personally said that if an official did not do things for the people, it would be better to go home and sell sweet potatoes. As an official, one had to do things one day at a time. If one did not want to offend people and did not do things, then one might as well not do anything and just go home and be a farmer. Yin Qingba went from being the vice chief of logistics in the city, Lord's Mansion, to being the chief of a department. He also told everyone that as long as one worked hard, gold would always shine. This made many of the officials who were originally very capable but were worried that they would not be able to make it big in the future feel relieved. Originally, they were worried that no one would see them lowering their heads to do things. However, with Yin Qingba's example, they did not have to worry so much. They also did not have to put in effort to make their superiors happy and speak up for themselves. Without people giving gifts, there were naturally no people receiving gifts. In an instant, the environment in the bureaucracy became much better. This made the people from the Ministry of Supervision and the Ministry of Anti-Corruption a lot less to do. They had no choice but to shift their attention from Qiqian City to the actual provinces under Yang Xie's control. The Deputy General of Laos, Haiqing, suddenly felt that there were a lot of strangers around him. He didn't know if he was being paranoid, so he found an opportunity and asked his confidant to invite Dou Lilong to his house. Haiqing, Lao Province's Deputy General, was the deputy of General He Guang. He was an important figure in the military. When Kanglin Kingdom was destroyed, he was very proactive and quickly changed the rudder according to the wind. He became someone He Guang trusted and recommended to Lao Province's governor, Luan Shaoqin. Step by step, he rose to the position of deputy general. To be able to become a deputy general, he was considered the second most important person in the entire Lao Province's military. Logically speaking, he should be satisfied. However, a man's greed was like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Soon, the greedy Haiqing was dragged down by someone. The person who started this was Dou Lilong. Dou Lilong, on the surface, was a businessman from Siam. However, he had another secret identity, one of the heads of Siam's intelligence agencies. He was in charge of investigating the matters of the neighboring countries. When possible, he would pull in important people from the opposing factions to his side. From the moment Dou Lilong set his eyes on Haiqing, the outcome was already decided. Just a total of 20,000 taels of silver was enough for the two of them to call each other brothers. The moment Dou Lilong revealed his identity, Haiqing could no longer turn back. Yang Xie had a rule that anyone who embezzled more than 10,000 taels of silver would be beheaded. For someone like him who had embezzled 20,000 taels of silver, even if he turned himself in, he would at most be spared. It was impossible for him to continue being an official. Since that was the case, other than being used by Dou Lilong, he had no other choice. After receiving the news, Dou Lilong came to the high mansion as a friend and a businessman. He met Haiqing, who was frightened by the mere twang of a bow. When they met, Haiqing looked at Dou Lilong in panic and said, "Sir Dou, you must save me." Dou Lilong pretended to be shocked and asked, "What's wrong, General Hai? Did something happen?" "Oh, Sir Dou, you don't know. I might have been targeted. Recently, when I go out, I always find a lot of strangers around." Haiqing explained the changes around him. He realized that he had embezzled too much and could not turn back. He continued, "Sir Dou, only you can save my life now. Seeing that I have helped your caravan a lot in the past, please help me. Otherwise, you can allow me to be an official in Siam." Although he was cursing Haiqing in his heart, Dou Lilong still smiled and said, "Mr. Hai must be thinking too much. When I arrived at your residence, I didn't find anything wrong. Could it be that I'm thinking too much?" No, I'm still a deputy general. I can still observe the situation around me," Haiqing explained. Just as they were talking, a soldier suddenly reported from outside, saying that General He Guang's personal guard captain, Yan Jiang, had arrived, along with 6 other soldiers. What should we do? Haiqing became even more flustered after hearing the news. He stood up and paced around in circles. Dou Lilong's eyebrows twitched, but he quickly regained his composure. He smiled and said, "It's okay. Many people know that we are friends. Are you saying that I am not allowed to talk to my friends when I am an official?" Haiqing did not relax at all because of this reason. Instead, he continued, "Lord Dou, you may not know this, but this Yan Jiang relies on He Guang's trust and is usually very domineering. You can't get past him just because he's a friend. Although he won't touch me, I'm afraid that he will take you away. If that happens under torture, can you guarantee that you won't say anything?" This. Dou Lilong, who was always calm, finally changed his expression. He did not dare to guarantee anything. With his glib tongue, he boasted that he was not afraid of anything. However, if he was really tortured, who knew how long he could last? He might not even be able to last for a while. Thinking that he absolutely could not be caught, Do Lilong had no choice but to be ruthless. He made a beheading gesture with his right hand and said, "Let's see the situation later. If the other party insists on forcing us, then we will strike first. Kill Yanjiang? That will definitely infuriate General Higuang." Hai Qing's entire body shuddered and his face turned pale. "What? Do you think that if you don't kill now, others won't kill you? Let me tell you, you can only move forward now. Think about it. Once you accomplish something big, our king will be happy. He will definitely give you a high post and generous salary. It is even possible that he will help you people of Kanglin restore your country. It is better than being scolded as a traitor." Do Lilong was going all out. He did not expect the situation to be so serious. If he knew, he would not have appeared so easily. In the courtyard of the high residence, Yanjiang, who was dressed in armor, led 6 soldiers and paced back and forth in the courtyard. After not seeing Hai Qing for a long time, he had lost count of how many times he had lost his temper. Finally, a manager came. He said that the High General was meeting with guests in the backyard, and it was not convenient for him to come over. He asked Captain Yen to go over himself. "Let's go. We have to take Do Lilong away today, no matter what," Yan Jiang said loudly. Then he led his 6 subordinates to the backyard. Not long after they walked to the backyard, the door to the front yard was completely closed from the inside. In the living room of the backyard, Hai Qing and Do Lilong were sitting at a table with food and drinks. Yan Jiang's sudden appearance instantly broke the harmonious atmosphere. "Deputy General Hai, I suspect that this Siamese merchant, Do Lilong, is a spy from the enemy country. I want to take him away now. I hope that you can make it easy for us." Chapter 1005. The fact that he wanted to arrest Hai Qing showed that he was strong enough. However, this sentence also made Hai Qing unhappy. "Captain Yen, Du Lilong is my friend. It's not good to be so rude in front of my friend." Hai Qing was a deputy general. He was someone who could be ranked in front of Luan Shaoqin. Yan Jiang was only the captain of Higuang's bodyguards. He was a family general in General He's residence. The difference in status between the two was like heaven and earth. However, Higuang placed a lot of importance on this personal guard captain and gave him a lot of power. That was why, when the captain faced Hai Qing, he did not have the slightest intention of backing down. "Deputy General Hai, I am here on official business. If you insist on stopping me, do you want me to ask the general to come and talk?" Yan Jiang knew the difference in status and knew that it was useless to say more. He directly brought up Higuang. He believed that the other party would not dare to refuse. As expected, once Higuang was brought up, Hai Qing's attitude became much softer. "Haha, there's no need for that. Is there some misunderstanding? How about this, Captain Yen? Please come over and have a drink. If you still can't talk, then you can take my guest away." Yan Jiang didn't suspect anything. After agreeing, he strode forward to the table and poured himself a glass of wine. He raised his glass to Hai Qing and said, "Deputy General Hai, I'm sorry to offend you like this." After speaking, Yan Jiang raised his head and poured the wine into his mouth. Hai Qing took this opportunity to take out a knife that he had prepared under the table and stabbed towards Yan Jiang's chest. Caught off guard, Yan Jiang's body was pierced by a knife. The wine glass slipped from his hand. He stared at Hai Qing in disbelief. He wanted to say something, but in the end, because of his severe injuries, he fell to the ground with a plop. At the same time, more than 10 of Hai Qing's bodyguards appeared in the backyard. They surrounded the 6 people that Yan Jiang brought. First, they shot 3 of them with arrows. Then they engaged in close combat. After paying the price of 1 dead and 1 injured, the 6 people were all dead. Take them away and deal with them properly. With the situation settled, Hai Qing waved to his loyal subordinates. He then looked at Do Lilong and sighed. "This time I have no other choice. Sir Do, you can rest assured." "Haha, don't worry. I have always been very confident in the Sea General. Are you sure that He Guang doesn't know about Yan Zhang's visit? Dou Lilong asked worriedly. Of course not. Based on my understanding of Yan Zhang, if he had asked for General He's permission beforehand, he wouldn't have drunk my wine this time. It's just that I can't hide this for too long. If I go missing for too long, it might arouse suspicion. Should I pack up and follow Douda to Siam? Hai Qing became anxious again. Don't worry. I will find someone to take the blame for this. What you need to do now is to keep developing your strength. Dou Lilong was much calmer. He then threw out a temptation that Hai Qing could not refuse. General Hai, have you never thought of replacing He Guang? Are you saying that I should be the general here? Hai Qing's breathing became heavier as he spoke. A general and a deputy general. It might seem like there was only a difference of one word, but the real difference in power was like heaven and earth. If he could become the general, he would not have to ask for permission for everything. It would be much more convenient for him to do many things. That's right. If we can chase Luan Shaoqin and the others out of Laos, you can choose a suitable puppet to become the king of Lancang. By then, you will have the absolute power. Then, with the support of Siam, you won't have to be afraid of anyone. Dou Lilong continued to persuade him. Hai Qing did not answer immediately. It was obvious that he was really tempted. Once it was done, he would no longer be the deputy general. He would be the grand tutor of a country. Everything in the country would have to depend on him. How glorious and glorious would that be? Bai Ming was busy building a bank and looting money. Nan Ming was busy fighting wars and recovering lost land. Yang Qindong had a rare period of peace. Other than going to some research institutes and factories to inspect and listen to the work reports of some departments, he spent most of his time with his wives and little Lele. After many days of intimate contact, Lele finally opened her mouth to accept Yang Qindong as her father. The relationship between the father and daughter became closer day by day. It was to the extent that little Lele would search the entire palace for her father if she did not see him for a while. After every night of hard work, there was finally good news. The first wife, Hu Yan, was pregnant. After little Lele, the sixth young master was going to have a son. When the news came out, there was a burst of cheers from the streets and alleys of Chichin City. No matter what, Lele was still a girl. Everything in the future could not be controlled by a girl. In addition, Hu Yan was the first wife. In some people's eyes, she was like a queen. Only her son would be the legitimate son. Only then would the Yang family have a true descendant. After a moment of jubilation, she seemed to have calmed down at this moment. He was like a big tree that was in the process of growing, and his wings were plump. At the same time, some other factions were not idle. Beneath the calm surface, there was a storm. In 1450, the Arab merchant Said Abu Bakr established an Islamic regime in the southern Philippines. This merchant called Abu Bakr was very smart and had great ambitions. He had been doing business since his youth and was used to seeing too many people using their power to oppress merchants. From then on, he wanted to build his own force and have the final say. Only then would he not be oppressed and oppressed by others. In the end, after being selected, he came to the southern part of the Philippines and established his first regime there. He then extended his influence to Basilan Island, Palawan Island, Zamboanga Island, Borneo, MLL Island, and other places. And just when he wanted to establish a foothold here and continue to expand, there was a sudden change in Luzon Island. The 5-Star Army occupied this place and disrupted his plans. After all, Abu Bakr was a merchant. The most important thing was profit. He knew the importance of taking the initiative. Since the 5-Star Army had occupied Luzon Island, it was impossible for him to expel people. The only thing he could do was to continue expanding his territory. Beginning in the second month of 1456, he successively sent troops to capture the eastern island of Caitanias, the western island of Mindoro, as well as the central island of Langbrin and Titsao. By the end of the 4th month, the whole Philippine archipelago, with the exception of Luzon and the nearer island of Polillo, was under a Bubert's control. When Yang Xie occupied Luzon Island, the main purpose was to protect the south side of Ryukyu Island and control the sea between the two islands. He did not intend to occupy all the islands. This allowed Abu Bakr to succeed time and time again. It wasn't until the other party had taken control of most of the islands that the city lord of Luzon Island, Lisheng, started to panic. Feeling the threat and danger, he immediately sent a telegram to the city lord's residence in Red Nest City to ask for further instructions. During this period, the inflated Abu Bakr was not satisfied with the status quo. He first changed the name of Sulu, a name that appeared in China's history books long ago, to Dave and declared himself the king of Dave. Then, he sent out his capable General Duterte to attack Polillo Island. This was more of a test. He wanted to see what kind of reaction the Five-Star Army would have if they were already at their doorstep. Polillo Island was an island in the northeast of the Philippines. It covered an area of 600 square kilometers. It was mainly rugged hills. The highest point on the island was 350 meters above sea level. Polillo Island did not have a dry season. Most of the rain was concentrated between November and January. This island was not very big and did not attract much attention. Thus, it could stay out of trouble. There were less than 20,000 people on the island, and they mainly relied on fishing for a living. Because of Abu Bakr's greed, the peaceful area finally attracted the flames of war. When General Duterte and his 2,000 soldiers landed on the island, the lives of the people here were shattered and nearly 20,000 people were turned into slaves in an instant. After Duterte entered the island, he did all kinds of evil. Any beautiful women were taken to the barracks. Not only were they humiliated, but they also asked the people on the island to make them food and drink. If they were not happy or slow, they would be punished with murder. It was extremely cruel. This practice naturally aroused the anger of the Aborigines on the island. Some young men who were proficient in swimming and sailing volunteered to leave the island that they had lived on for many years under the cover of the night. They rowed their boats to the nearby Luzon Island to seek help. The distance between the two islands was very close. Occasionally, there would be some interaction. According to the people on Luzon Island, although the island was occupied by a force called the Five-Star Army, the people there lived as before. Not only were they not affected by the flames of war, their lives were very orderly. It was said that even the quality of life had improved a lot. They could fish, weave and farm and sell food to the Five-Star Army in exchange for remuneration. With an increase in income, the quality of life had improved. Everyone's face was filled with joy. Although General Duterte was extremely cruel and did not treat the people as humans, he was still vigilant. After a few young men rowed away, he discovered them. He immediately sent 200 soldiers to chase after them in 5 fast boats bought by Abu Bakr from the west. Although the speed of this kind of fast ship could not compare to the fast ships built by the Five-Star military shipyards, it was still much faster than ordinary ships. It did not take long for them to see the tail of the fleeing ship. Then shouts sounded from all directions, and the sound of bows and arrows began to be fired. Chapter 1006. Just as the 5 fast boats were about to surround the small boat that had escaped, a boat with a 5-starred red flag sailed over in the night. This was not an official boat, but a fishing boat belonging to the residents of Luzon. The sudden encounter was not part of the plan. The soldiers who were used to riding roughshod over Polillo Island. When they saw the fishing boat, they only hesitated for a moment before making the decision to sink the 2 boats so that the incident would not be known to the world. Originally, after seeing the 5-starred flag, the escaping youngsters thought that they had seen their savior. However, when they saw that the 5-starred ship didn't have any combat power, and the enemy's ship continued to shoot arrows, with no intention of letting them go, they realized that they had implicated the enemy. They repeatedly shouted, announcing their identity and purpose, and at the same time, asking the people on the 5-starred ship to leave immediately and not be implicated. However, it was too late to say anything at this time. Since they chose to attack, of course, they would not let anyone leave. 5 Dafei clippers flew over and kept attacking. One of the clippers was even equipped with cannons. One of the cannons hit the fishing boat of Luzon Island, causing it to shake and crumble. The situation was so dangerous that the crew of the fishing boat began to abandon the boat. Some of the good swimmers took a wooden board and paddled towards the direction of Port Luzon. They had tears in their eyes as they wanted to pass on the news of being attacked by the Dafei kingdom. They clearly remembered that the new governor of Luzon, Li Sheng, had said that as long as they hung the 5-starred red flag, no one in this area would make things difficult for them. Otherwise, they would suffer 10 times, 100 times, or even 1,000 times the retaliation. The 5 Dafei clippers continued to attack. After an hour, the 2 ships that were besieged were sunk one after another. Then they checked the sea area again and killed more than a dozen crew members who were swimming in the sea. After seeing that there were no survivors, they whistled and left triumphantly. This battle was known as the Sorrow of Luzon in the history of Yangtze. Since Yang Qindong subdued Kaohsiung until now, in the past 8 years, any boat with a 5-starred red flag had not been attacked for no reason. The Dafei kingdom had set a precedent. People who could walk on the sea all year round. Needless to say, they were always very good swimmers. The first mate of the fishing boat that belonged to Luzon province, Wang Li, belonged to the category of people who were particularly good at swimming. After the boat was hit, he jumped into his hands with a wooden board. Because his swimming speed was very fast, he left the patrol range of the DF country's fast boat and escaped. After that, Wang Li exerted all his strength, and based on his experience, he found a direction in the dark sea. Finally, after 2 days, when he was exhausted, he encountered other ships and was rescued. When he woke up after being fed the hot rice soup, the first thing he said was that there was danger ahead and he wanted to see Governor Li Sheng. Then he fainted. The fishing boats were all approved by the Luzon provincial government, and there was a connection between them. Someone recognized the chief officer, and the captain immediately gave the order to return to Port Luzon. A day later, Wang Li and the others returned to Luzon Island, and then they were escorted to the provincial government. Governor Li Sheng warmly received them. After knowing what happened, he was very angry. In front of hundreds of fishing boats, he expressed that they would immediately send people to investigate this matter. If everything was true, then the DF country would have to give an explanation. Admitting fault, apologizing, and compensation were all necessary. Otherwise, the 5-star army would have the right to use force to get justice. Li Sheng said so, and he did so. He called the Luzon Island Garrison Commander Hang and ordered him to go to the location of the incident. He had to prove that there was a sea battle there, and it was not man-made damage or natural damage. In short, there had to be evidence. Speaking of which, Yangtze did not have many soldiers stationed on Luzon Island. Other than a garrison of 2,000 people, there was a public security team of 3,000 to 4,000 people. It was just that the public security was scattered. Normally, they could maintain law and order, but once there was a battle, the garrison would have to move first. After Hang, he received the mission. He took the fast boat left by the 5-star army and set off, heading straight to a location not far from Polillo Island. Li Sheng also sent a telegram to the Chigang City Lord Mansion, requesting that if there was a change in the situation, the 5-star Army Navy could provide support. In the Chigang City Lord Mansion, the deputy city lord in charge of military affairs sent the telegram to Yu Qian, and the sound of a table being slammed sounded. Someone once said that he was too humble, saying that he was loyal to the people of the Ming dynasty and not to the emperor of the dynasty. From this, it could be seen that he valued the people very much. It was precisely because of this that he and Yang Qindong had more to talk about. After being robbed here by a shady method, he could still concentrate on his work. Now that he heard that someone actually took the initiative to challenge the power of the 5-star army, how could he let it go? He immediately asked his assistant to immediately contact the deputy commander of the Navy, Gao Xiong, and he wanted to meet with him to discuss the matter. Just over an hour later, Gao Xiong rode a bicycle to the city Lord Mansion. The two big shots discussed the matter of Luzon Island in detail, and then came to a consensus. Finally, they decided to report this matter to the sixth young master. They both believed that this matter had already touched Yang Qindong's bottom line. If they reported it, they would be able to obtain a faster and better solution. In the palace, Yang Qindong was taking a walk with the first madam, Hu Yan. Women who were pregnant always liked to be sentimental. Yang Qindong would walk with her whenever he had the time, not only comforting her, but also helping her train her body. It was killing two birds with one stone. Suddenly hearing that Yu Qian and Gao Xiong had come together, his intuition told him that this must be a big matter. Dong Shuai, business is more important, you should go. I'm going to talk to my second sister and ask for some good medicine to prevent miscarriage. Hu Yan said very considerately, Okay, be careful when you walk. Yang Qindong laughed and watched Hu Yan leave. But when he turned around, his expression became a lot more dignified. Needless to say, for the city lord and the deputy commander of the Navy to come see him together, it must be an important matter. Connecting the fact that Gao Xiong came with them and not Lung Song, the deputy commander of the army, it was very likely to be related to the matter at sea. Yang Qindong appeared very quickly. Yu Qian and Gao Xiong didn't even finish a cup of tea before he came to the living room. Seeing that the two were about to get up, he made a gesture of inviting them to sit, and sat down on the chair in the middle and said, Speak, did something unexpected happen? Sixth young master is wise. Gao Xiong flattered. Yu Qian was a lot calmer. He sent the telegram from Mayor Li Sheng, governor, to Yang Qindong and said, Bugnam of Gojoseon, Mayor Li sent a telegram saying that a fishing boat in Luzon City, Yangtze's name for Luzon Island, was attacked. According to Chief Officer Wang Li, who escaped, it was the fast ships of the recently established Dafei Kingdom that attacked. Yang Qindong took the telegram and looked at it carefully, then raised his head. The telegram said that the fishing boat hung a 5-star flag. Could it be that someone dared to attack? Yes, sixth young master. This is what made us angry. They ignored our flag, which is clearly a provocation. Previously, we didn't have many immigrants in our hands, and the distribution of the islands was too loose. We also had the new Second Army established, and North Korea provoked us, so we didn't send troops to attack them. However, this became the reason why they looked down on us. This is too much. I think that we should immediately send troops to Song City to declare our sovereignty. If necessary, we can strengthen the patrols at sea as a deterrent. As the deputy commander of the Navy, Gao Xiong's words represented the will of the entire Navy. Listening to Gao Xiong's report, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed. Is this the Navy's idea, or does the mayor's office have the same idea? The mayor's office is still waiting for the latest telegram. Didn't they say that Hang He, the commander of the Song City Garrison Regiment, has already gone to investigate? Yu Qian expressed his experienced and astute opinion. It was obvious that he wanted to get evidence first. This was also in line with the Han people's principle of doing things, which was to plan before acting. The results of the investigation? Is it really that important? Yang Qindong suddenly laughed, which made Yu Qian and Gao Xiong confused. They didn't understand what Yang Qindong meant. Without waiting for the two to figure it out, Yang Qindong already spoke. They have already sunk our ships. How long do we have to wait? I think we should order the troops to gather now and show these daring daft country how powerful we are. Do it now? But we don't have enough evidence. Yu Qian was shocked when he heard Yang Qindong so boldly decide to send troops. Evidence? Why do we need evidence? Don't you know what don't need evidence means? Moreover, it's already a fact that our fishing ships were sunk. The only ones who can do this in those waters are the daft country's army. So what are we waiting for? Yang Qindong sneered. In the future, the words "don't need evidence" had restricted the development of a country. Considering various reasons, there were some things that had to be endured. Now that Yang Xie's navy was so powerful, it was time to give them a taste of their own medicine. As the founder of Yang Xie, the commander of Yang Xie's 3 armies, Yang Qindong gave this order. Naturally, the people under him could only obey. In addition, it was indeed the daft country that provoked them first, so it was reasonable for them to send an army to give an appropriate counterattack. Yu Qian and Gao Xiong quickly agreed with Yang Qindong's decision. But what they didn't know was that this time, Yang Qindong didn't just want to teach the daft country a small lesson, but when he made his move, he wanted to destroy the country. There were already 600,000 literate and skilled commoners in Qiqian City who had made preparations to migrate. Moreover, under the Southern Ming Dynasty's war, there were still many Han commoners rushing to Mount Liang's containment formation every day, turning into Qiqian City. Chapter 1007. It could be imagined that, in the future, there would be more and more knowledgeable Han people. With such confidence, it was time to take over the entire archipelago. Previously, he didn't make a move because he didn't have a good reason. Now that the other side had taken the initiative to provoke him, how could he let go of such an opportunity? Yang Qindong was determined to deal with the Dafei kingdom. Gao Xiong's navy naturally cooperated with him. After a discussion between the 3 of them, they decided to mobilize the entire 1st Sea Army. That was the 1st Sea Division, 2nd Sea Division, and 3rd Sea Division. They would launch a fierce attack on the Dafei kingdom from 3 different directions. They had to make the other side suffer. They had to let them and the surrounding countries know what the consequences of offending the 5-star army were. Order the new 2nd Army's 6th Sea Division to strengthen the patrols. If there are any other forces that try to interfere, don't hesitate to beat them back. At the same time, the 5th Sea Division stationed in North Korea can also be transferred back. That place can be left to the local garrison. What we need to do now is to do our best to win this battle. Yang Qindong said in a powerful voice. This order was very similar to Yang Qindong's usual approach. Either he didn't make a move, or he would go all out. If he could destroy a country, he would destroy it. If he couldn't destroy it, he would destroy it. If he couldn't destroy it, he would destroy it. After the order was issued, the war machine started. The Navy quickly began to assemble. All the officers who were visiting their families had to report back to their respective units. At the same time, the City Lord's Manor was also making various preparations. Under the overall command, the newly developed 100mm mortar shells were quickly delivered to the 1st Sea Division for use. 600,000 Han people voluntarily signed up, and 300,000 people were ready to enter the archipelago at any time. The condition was that as long as they were Han people who entered the archipelago, they would be given a job. For example, they would be given a job in the local government. If they met the conditions, they would be given a job in the public security, hospital, school, industry and commerce, government, tax, and other departments. Not only did the 300,000 Han people have to prepare for migration, the other provinces also had to prepare for the migration of people. Each province had to prepare at least 200,000 people. At the same time, they had to prepare to accept a certain number of indigenous people. This kind of interchangeable population exchange could often solve the problem of the local people huddling together to the greatest extent, allowing them to quickly forget who they were before and better join the Han family. Above the sea, under Ma Li's guidance, Captain Hang, he finally found the remnants of the ship that had been hit by the cannon fire. From the surface, one could clearly see that it had been hit by a cannon. With this piece of evidence, the ship quickly turned back and headed straight for the port of Luzon. But just as the ship turned around, dozens of great F country ships suddenly appeared around the sea. They were the great F country ships, led by Duterte. He had long expected that the 5-star army would come to this area to search and inspect, so he had been waiting here. Initially, he wanted to wait for them to get closer, but when he saw that his prey was about to leave, he couldn't hide anymore. He jumped out directly, wanting to leave he and the others here. Is it a Dafei ship? He saw the enemy ships around him, and his eyes flashed with anger. This kind of encirclement exposed their ambitions without a doubt. Unfortunately, the ship he was on was not the fishing ship from before. He was piloting a level 3 warship left behind by the Navy in Song City. Not only did it have a constant speed, it also had a powerful 100mm mortar that could hit a target more than 10 miles away. At that time, it could be said to be the top artillery. Order the ship to speed up and leave. Order the artillery to reload the shells and adjust the range. If any ship dares to block our way, blow it up. He said loudly. His order also made the crew members excited, and they shouted loudly to make various preparations. Although they were surrounded, the 5-star warship did not intend to surrender. Instead, it sped up, which greatly exceeded Duterte's expectations. He thought that the other party would take the initiative to stop and reason with him. Didn't all Han people do this? At that time, he would be able to kill everyone on the ship at a close distance and occupy the ship. He could see that this ship was not simple. Once it belonged to him, after going back to study it, it should be able to promote the development of their ships. He was originally a company commander in the Cold Front Navy. At that time, it was City Lord Li Sheng who took a fancy to him and wanted him to stay, so he retired from the Cold Front Navy and transferred to the Garrison Regiment as the commander. Speaking of which, he was promoted a few ranks, but he still missed the time when he was a Cold Front Navy officer. Wherever he went, he was majestic. This kind of person, after many years of training, was warlike in his bones, and it was even more impossible to make him surrender. Therefore, when he gave the order to charge out and bombard the ships blocking their way, it really caught the Dafei Navy off guard. The combat power of the Garrison Regiment was very ordinary. Most of them were made up of foreign men who had only been trained and had not experienced real combat. They might be able to suppress bandits, but they were not mature enough to fight a big battle like this. Fortunately, this time he brought out the elites of the regiment, and there were a few Cold Front members among them. There was no problem with them controlling the mortar. After adjusting the direction of the mortar and locking onto the target, a shot was fired directly at the Dafei Navy ship blocking their way. One of the advantages of the mortar was that it was more accurate to lock on to the target. In addition, the loading speed of the mortar was fast. Before the enemy was ready, the mortar was fired and hit the target. The powerful explosion and power almost flattened the enemy's ship. With one shot, the ship's main personnel were all killed or injured. It completely lost its combat power and could no longer pose any threat. This was a one-shot hit. The 3rd-level warship that sped up rushed out of the encirclement before the Dafei Navy could react. It attracted the dissatisfied roar of Duterte. Quick, catch up. We must destroy him. He dares to make an enemy of our Dafei Navy. He will definitely die. The clamoring Duterte led dozens of other Dafei Navy ships to chase after them. The sound of gunfire was heard, and huge waves were set off one after another on the originally calm sea. However, in front of the 3rd-level warship, not a single shell could lock onto the target and hit the 3rd-level warship. He glanced back with a look of disdain on his face, but then his expression turned serious. The current situation was that he was lucky to escape. In the end, he was still the one being chased. If he was not careful, he might be caught by the enemy. If his luck was bad and he was hit by a shell, then in this vast sea, he would not be able to call for help. Speed up and move closer to the Luzon port. Thinking of the 4 new mortars installed at the Luzon port, his heart calmed down a lot. According to the current situation, he could only think of a way to return to the port and then rely on the danger to defend. One chasing and one escaping. This scene played out on the sea. Under the full power of the 3rd-level warship, flying the 5-star flag, the distance between the two sides gradually increased. His luck was still good. Even when he was out of the enemy's range of attack, he was still hit by a shell. He knew that he was temporarily safe, but then he began to worry about the Luzon port. Still, other than the 4 mortars arranged at the Luzon port, there were no other defensive measures. With the average combat power of the Song City garrison, would they be able to stop 2,000 enemies? Once the enemy rushed to the coast, what kind of destruction and impact would it bring? But if they did not retreat to the Luzon port, where could they go? This third-level warship ran on coal. Considering the mission this time, it was equipped with about the same amount of raw materials. If they could not rush back as usual, they could face the predicament of running out of energy at any time. Although they had considered such a thing when they were developing the Level 3 naval battle system, and if they had no other choice, they could row the boats manually. However, with that kind of speed, wouldn't the enemy catch up to them very quickly? Speed up and return, then quickly gather the soldiers, guard the port, and ask for help from the higher-ups. In the end, he made the decision to return to the port quickly. Compared to taking the risk of running in circles with the enemy, it was better to return to the port and use the terrain to counterattack. As one chased and one fled, the distance between the two sides kept increasing. However, it was obvious that the enemy behind him was enraged. They chased after he with no intention of giving up. Judging from the direction the enemy was heading, it was likely that they were heading to the Luzon port. Considering that the battle had already begun, there was no need to wait any longer. Duterte could not help but want to show off his strength, rush to the Luzon port, and occupy the entire Song City. Before coming, Duterte had already read the detailed information about Song City. He knew that the 5-star army only had a garrison here. The garrison had the same number of people as him, 2,000. Moreover, their combat power was far inferior to his. The enemy was just a bunch of new recruits. At the very least, many people in his team had been pirates nearby and had seen life and death. They were all bought by Abu Burkle with a large sum of money to serve him. In terms of combat power, he should not be afraid of them. More importantly, Duterte also knew that the garrison of Song City mostly used cold weapons such as knives, spears, and swords. Furthermore, he had 200 hollow tongs and 50 flintlock pistols in his army. The king had spent a lot of money to purchase them from Western merchant ships. This was where his advantage lay. If he used it well, occupying the entire Luzon Island would not be a problem. At that time, he would become the hero of the entire Daf country. It could only be said that he was short-sighted. The inexperienced Duterte did not know how powerful the 5-star army was. He, who did not live in the sea area before, thought that the 5-star army was just like the natives of the mainland. After firing a few cannons and firing a few shots, the other party would really admit defeat and surrender. Chapter 1008. He couldn't imagine the power of the 5-star army. One chased while the other fled. Nearly a day later, at dawn, he took the lead and returned to Port Luzon. As soon as the warship came to a stop, before the wooden planks connected to the land were fully lowered, he had already dashed out. While shouting for everyone to evacuate, he ran towards the 4 mortar turrets on the port. Port Luzon, and even the entire Luzon Island, hadn't experienced war for many years. Last time, the 5-star army came, but they didn't encounter any resistance and occupied the entire island. Many people didn't have a better understanding of the cruelty and horror of war. Even though and his comrades were running and shouting, not many people really paid attention to them. There were even some fishermen who continued to walk toward the fishing boats anchored at the port, as though they didn't care about the situation. Just as he and the others ran to the turrets and began to shout for their comrades to raise the shells and adjust the muzzle of the cannons, dozens of warships flying the flag of the Daf country appeared. Duterte, who was mixed in the crowd, shouted and fired his cannons, his face full of excitement. The sound of the cannons roared. About 20 cannons on the dozens of ships were suddenly fired, making earth-shattering sounds. The shells fell on the ships anchored at Port Luzon. In a short time, countless fishing boats were hit. Not long after, the only third-level warship of the Song City garrison was also hit and sank. Cannons were ruthless. They wouldn't let you go just because you were old, women, children, or civilians. Wherever the cannons landed, hundreds and thousands of civilians were covered. Amid the screams, their lives were mercilessly devoured. For a time, the port was in chaos. Cries, shouts, cannons, and gunshots mixed together, forming a scene of hell. Taking advantage of the chaos, the Daft Country Navy opened a path with cannons and began to approach Port Luzon, preparing to land. Fire! In the turrets on the port, Hang He had already adjusted the firing direction of a mortar. After the first shell was loaded, the counterattack began. The cannons flew in the air and landed on a battleship outside the port, causing an even bigger explosion. At the same time, the other 3 cannons did not separate and began to fire back. They hit the Daft Kingdom's ships that had not yet entered the port, causing waves of cries and cries for help from the soldiers. The counterattack began. For more accurate and powerful mortars suppressed the fierce attack of the Great F Country and heavily hit the ships behind the enemy's team. However, for the Great F Country soldiers who had already docked their ships and were mixed with many civilians, they felt powerless. If he retracted the cannons, the civilians would be hurt, but if he didn't, the enemy might take the opportunity to charge forward. At this moment, Hang He's eyes were filled with uncertainty and hesitation. As a former member of the Cold Front, he could fire cannons, fire guns, or even draw his sword at the enemy without fear. However, he really couldn't do anything to the people who had already submitted to him. "Leader, what should we do? The enemy is coming." Seeing that Hang He was in a daze, a platoon commander on the side asked anxiously. After a few seconds, Hang He's voice sounded, "Order the soldiers to prepare their weapons and prepare for battle." After hesitating for a while, he finally did not give the order to harm the civilians. The responsibility of a soldier was to protect the safety of the area. If he needed to use the civilians as a stepping stone when the war came, he really couldn't bring himself to give such an order. A few of the foreign race company commanders who had joined later were confused when they heard that Hang He had abandoned the cannons and wanted to use people to fight the muskets. However, Hang He's attitude was very firm as he said, "This is an order." Just these 4 words alone already represented a lot of content. No matter how unwilling they were, it was an iron law for soldiers to obey orders. The few company commanders could only shake their heads and walk out of the turrets with resentment on their faces. At the same time, they looked as if they were ready to die. They began to command their soldiers to prepare for defense and counterattack. Most of the time, you couldn't have your cake and eat it too. Hang, he understood this principle. He also knew that if he was still serving in the Cold Front, the officers above would definitely make the same choice as him. Therefore, he did not regret it. He was only afraid that he wouldn't be able to hold on until the main force of the Cold Front arrived. If the enemy really charged forward and abandoned Luzon port, then he would be condemned for eternity. The moment the cannons were fired, the newly built Luzon city, which was not far from the port, sensed it. As the city lord, Li Sheng immediately called for a telegraph operator and asked him to immediately send a distress signal to the city lord's mansion, the Navy headquarters, and even the 6th Young Master's radio station. While sending the telegram, Li Sheng made the decision to close all 4 gates of Luzon City. Then he began to call for some of the reserve militia in the city lord's mansion. He took out the limited weapons in the city lord's mansion's warehouse and asked them to defend the city together with him for the safety of his home. In Port Luzon, Duterte braved the danger of being swallowed by the cannons and walked out of the warship. He was surprised to find that there were no cannons at this distance. He looked around in confusion. When he saw many local citizens lying on the ground trembling, he finally understood everything. He laughed and said to his subordinates, "Do you see that? Our opponents are stupid." For the sake of the safety of these lowly citizens, they didn't dare to open fire and allowed us to board the port. Ha ha ha, this is an act of suicide. That's right, General. Your chance to make a big contribution has come. As long as there are no cannons, no one will be a match for us with our firearms. The soldiers quickly flattered. You're right. Let's make a big contribution. Charge! Duterte laughed loudly and began to organize the soldiers who had boarded the port to launch an assault. There was no difference in military strength, and it was a small-scale battle. The advantage of firearms could be put to good use. When Duterte led his troops to charge, he organized his men to counterattack. Every time there was a burst of gunfire, a dozen or so garrison soldiers would fall to the ground covered in blood. They counterattacked 3 times in a row. Although they had stopped the enemy's advance, they had also lost about 100 people. Seeing this result, the battalion commander finally couldn't help but say, "Commander, if this continues, I'm afraid we'll all die. If we can't do it, then we'll open fire." "We can't open fire. That will only hurt the citizens. Even if we win, we'll be sinners. We won't be able to answer to the 6th young master. Everyone hold on. I'm sure the city lord already knows about this and will inform the nearby navy. As long as everyone holds on, we can win." He stubbornly insisted on his decision. He knew very well that if he died protecting the people, the Marine Army wouldn't punish him for his crimes. They would only praise him, and his family would be well taken care of. On the other hand, if he didn't care about the safety of the citizens and opened fire to protect himself, then regardless of whether he won or not, he would be punished by the military. At that time, his family would be implicated. Even if he died, he would have to bear a bad reputation. He's insistence caused the garrison to suffer even greater losses in the following battle. Originally, there were only 2 battalions of soldiers outside the port. After 5 or 6 waves of attacks, the number of casualties had reached half. If this continued, it would take at most 2 hours for the remaining 400 soldiers to lose their lives. The battalion commander was seriously injured and was carried away. The battalion commander of the 2nd Battalion had also led the soldiers to charge twice and was slightly injured. He immediately decided to lead the counterattack. Anyway, as long as he had a breath left, he would not let the enemy reach the fort. As long as he had a breath left, he would not fire at the port and hurt a single citizen. "Commander, you are the backbone of everyone. You can't lead the team." When the battalion commander of the 2nd Battalion was about to launch another counterattack, he saw he stand up. How could he let that happen? He immediately expressed his opposition. "Okay, don't argue at this time. If you can all charge, why can't I, the commander, do the same? If I die, then you will be the commander. If you die, then the company commander below you will be the commander. In short, there is still one person who must protect the fort. If unfortunately we are all going to die, then the last person will set off the explosives. These for mortars must not be left to the enemy. This is our mission. Do you all understand?" These words were like the last words left before death. The battalion commander of the 2nd Battalion didn't know what to say. He could only watch as he took his bow and rushed out of the fort. He was worthy of being the former commander of the Cold Front Company. His individual quality was extremely strong. After he rushed out of the fort, he aimed at the enemy less than 100 meters away and released arrows. 1 arrow, 2 arrows, and he killed 2 soldiers of the Great F Kingdom who were armed with guns. A bullet flew past his body and left a bloody wound on his leg. He moved his right leg and found that it was only a scratch. It wasn't a big problem. He continued to shoot arrows. At the same time, he touched his waist sword and tried to get closer to the enemy. He wanted to find a way to kill a few more in close combat, other than the warships that were destroyed by the cannon fire. Duterte only brought 1,300 to 400 soldiers to the port. Together with the flintlocks, there were only 200 weapons. Once a soldier died, other soldiers would quickly replace him. This allowed him to maintain enough firepower to suppress the enemy. After killing 200 of the enemy's people and losing 100 of his own people, Duterte's face was a bit ugly. Didn't the intelligence say that this garrison regiment was just established and didn't have much combat power? Why were they still so difficult to deal with? It had been almost 2 hours since they entered the port. This was the territory of the 5-star army. If he couldn't quickly end the battle, who knew if the 5-star army's reinforcements would arrive? Chapter 1009. Thinking that things might change if he delayed any longer, Duterte also became ruthless. He shouted angrily at more than 200 gun-wielding subordinates. This time, everyone, let's go together. The enemy doesn't have many people left. We only need one charge to obtain the final victory. Anyone who kills the enemy will be heavily rewarded. Listen to my command and attack together. The general gave an order. Whether they were willing or not, they had to carry it out. In addition, they already had the advantage in numbers. The 200 men with guns stood up from the ground with a roar. They divided into 3 echelons and began to move forward. Whenever they saw the shadows of the 5-star army, they would immediately fire and then retreat to the echelons behind them. They would continue to reload and prepare to launch a new round of attacks. As a result, they formed a type of suppressive fire that made the 5-star army unable to raise their heads. He was less than 60 meters away from the DAF soldiers. Originally, he was thinking of how to get close to the enemy and kill them with his sword. That way, the enemy could only fire 1 shot at a time. But when he saw the enemy coming in an orderly manner, his eyes had a sense of helplessness. In this situation, even if he jumped out, he would only become a target. The enemy was getting closer and closer. The soldiers in the fort were suppressed by the guns and could not raise their heads to fight back. He and the dozens of soldiers outside were also suppressed and could not show their heads. The sound of footsteps was getting closer and closer. Everyone, prepare to fight back with me. He knew that he could not wait any longer. Even if it was dangerous, he had to rush out and kill them in close range. As for what kind of effect he could achieve, it was all up to fate. At this time, he remembered the oath he made when he first joined Lung Fong. Protect the country, die without fear. Perhaps this was the time to fulfill his promise. Everyone get ready. I will count to 3. Everyone, charge together. 1, 2. Just as he was about to shout 3, a series of gunshots suddenly rang out. It was as if firecrackers were going off continuously. Hundreds of meters away, countless Navy soldiers wearing white military uniforms appeared. They were all holding Type 95 rifles, firing continuously while rushing forward. They surrounded the harbor. The sound of gunfire was endless, and under the continuous stream of people, the soldiers of the Daf Kingdom who were about to charge forward were killed from a distance. Both of them held a gun, but comparing a huatong to a flintlock gun was like comparing a fire stick to a sharp weapon. They could not be mentioned in the same breath. The sudden appearance of the 5-star army caught the DF soldiers off guard and made them dizzy. Kill. The commander of the 1st Sea Division, Nyatong, personally led the troops. Wearing the rank of a 4-star colonel, he was like a beast that had been released from its cage, constantly charging forward. The 9.5 in his hand constantly spat out tongues of flame, reaping one enemy's life after another. Beside him, the soldiers who were like white waves were also charging forward bravely. Looking at the soldiers of the Great F Country, their formation was in chaos due to the sudden attack. Countless soldiers were shot and killed. Even the arrogant Duterte was forced to lie on the ground. He didn't even dare to raise his head. If someone had said that they could suppress him to the point where he couldn't raise his head with a flintlock before this, he would definitely not believe it and would only laugh at the other party for being ignorant. But everything really happened. He finally realized that the so-called powerful firearms of the Great F Country were just a joke, a self-deceiving joke. Gravel around him was constantly being hit shattered, and flew in all directions. Occasionally, it would cut through his clothes and leave wounds on his body. However, at this moment, Duterte had completely forgotten about the pain. His entire body was trembling, like a wild wolf that had always been used to being a tyrant, suddenly discovering that the person standing in front of him was a ferocious tiger. His firepower was completely suppressed. Looking from afar, there were shadows of enemies everywhere. Looking back, he was also surrounded by enemies. At that moment, Duterte knew what the result would be if he continued to fight. Duterte, who didn't want to die and was also afraid of death, didn't hesitate and directly shouted, "Don't kill me, I surrender, we surrender!" It was the same for the general. It was easy to imagine that when the soldiers below heard this shout, it was as if they had heard the sound of nature. One after another, they shouted to surrender. Then, without waiting for the 5-star army to reply, they threw their spears and spears all over the ground. It was as if they had given up on resisting. This was an army that only knew how to bully people. Facing the unarmed people of Polillo Island and the unarmed fishermen on the fishing boats of Song City, they wantonly displayed their killing intent. Facing the stubborn resistance of the Luzon Island garrison, they pounced on them like hungry wolves, relying on their powerful firearms to display their bloodthirsty side. But the moment they met the 5-star army, which was stronger than them, they immediately cowered. After only one wave of attacks, they immediately chose to surrender. This was how they should behave. Such an army was only fit to bully some commoners who were far inferior to them. If they were faced with a strong army, they would not even be as good as the commoners. Duterte surrendered, and the thousands of soldiers behind him also surrendered. On the port of Luzon, in front of the turrets, a large number of people knelt down. At this moment, they were surrounded by the 5-star Navy. They couldn't do anything other than covering their heads with their hands. Yang Chindong, accompanied by the deputy commander of the Navy, the commander of the 1st Marine Army, Gao Xiong, and others, boarded the port. What he saw was a scene of devastation. He saw the tragic scene of countless people dying under the guns of the great F Country soldiers. The commander of the 1st Division, Nha Tong, quickly sent people to understand the results of the battle. He also saw Commander Hang He. At this moment, he saluted Yang Chindong and reported the situation. When he reported the number of casualties, Yang Chindong's face became darker and darker. Reporting to the 6th young master, the above is the specific process and result of this battle. Please tell us everything, 6th young master. After division commander Nha finished his report, he saluted again. Then he handed over his authority and stood to the side. After a while, countless people on the port also rushed over. Some of them were lucky and escaped from the battle. Some heard the gunshots and rushed over to save their families. Looking from a distance, there were about 2,000 to 3,000 people densely packed together. Unlike before, when they saw the garrison troops, they kept a respectful distance from them. At this moment, when they looked at the wounded garrison troops, there was only admiration and admiration in their eyes. Obviously, they could use the 4 cannons built in the port to counterattack and form an overwhelming attack. But in order to protect the lives of the people, in order to not let innocent people be affected, they didn't do so. Instead, they used their own lives to fill in the gaps. They truly did the action of sacrificing their own lives to protect the people. Just based on this, they were worthy of the respect and love of the people. After silently listening to Nha Tong's report, Yang Chindong found himself a high ground and stood on it. His gaze first fell on the surrounding civilians who had rushed over. Then he looked at the hundreds of soldiers of the garrison regiment who had very excited expressions. All sorts of feelings welled up in his heart, and an unspeakable thought rapidly formed in his mind. Mencius said, "The people are the most important, the country comes second, and the ruler is the least important." For so many years, this was often just a slogan. How many people actually did it? But today, the Port Luzon garrison soldiers did it. Our 5-star army soldiers did it. Just now, They would rather face the terrifying gunfire of the enemy, face the danger of sacrificing their precious lives at any time, and would rather use their flesh and blood to resist the enemy than hurt a single person. What kind of spirit is this? This is a spirit where blood is thicker than water. Yang Qindong's voice became louder and louder. This is enough to prove that they treat the people as their own family, as their parents, relatives, and best friends. Only in this way would he be willing to sacrifice his own life rather than harm others. Just based on this, they're the most adorable people of this generation. Everyone, am I right? The most adorable people, the most adorable people. At that moment, the thousands of people who were at the forefront shouted like a tide, their momentum soaring to the sky. And such shouts and Yang Qindong's speech also moved Hang He and the others, making them and the people couldn't help but tear up. He gestured for them to stop, and the shouts stopped abruptly. Even the thousands of commoners were now, like an organized army, obeying orders and listening to commands. They did very well. Everyone's performance was also very good. Because of this king will now make 3 decisions. First, bury and compensate all the soldiers and people who died in this battle. They were all innocent people who died to fulfill their duty. They were invaded and died for no reason. We must remember them and treat their relatives who are still alive well. We must let the dead close their eyes in peace, and the living can also go into battle with light burdens so that they can live a more exciting life. Long live the Southern Martial King. Long live the Southern Martial King. What responded to Yang Qindong were the shouts of thousands of people and countless soldiers. Clearly, these words were what they were thinking. After making a stop gesture again, Yang Qindong continued, "Second, from today onwards, the garrison regiment will be officially promoted to the Song City Garrison Division. The division commander will be Hang He, and there will be 5 regiments under his command, each with 5 battalions, a total of 10,000 people. At the same time, he will be equipped with 5 third-grade warships and 1 fourth-grade warship. Under his command, he will protect the peace of this region. Long live the Southern Martial King. Long live the Southern Martial King. Third, from Luzon Island to Sumatra Island in the southwest, it has always been the Great Ming's territory. The existence of the Great Ming's old port is proof. Now, the Great Ming country is wantonly invading our territory, taking our benefits, killing our people, and stealing our territory. Their actions have angered both men and gods. Henceforth, this king announces that we have lost control. Anyone who dares to resist in this region will be killed. Anyone who betrays the country will be killed. Anyone who doesn't back down will be killed." Chapter 10:10. After roaring out the word kill, Yang Qindong's gaze turned to Duterte and the others. His murderous aura grew heavier as he said, "These invaders, they didn't care about killing civilians. They should be beheaded according to their crimes. Next, this king will make a judgment. All the invaders will be sentenced to death, in order to appease the sacrifice of the garrison soldiers and the innocent people of Luzon Port. Now, High First Division, please carry it out. Long live the Southern Martial King. Long live the Southern Martial King." Once again, the sea of people shouted in unison, representing everyone's thoughts. Duterte and the others who understood the meaning of Yang Qindong's words instantly turned pale. This general was still trying to explain something. "You can't kill us. We have already surrendered. We are captives. And I also know many secrets of Daft Country. I can provide you with help." Captives, if the ones who lost were the garrison soldiers, and the ones who lost were the people of the port, can you not kill a single one? As for the secrets you speak of, do you think in front of my powerful navy there is anything that can resist our vanguard? After Yang Qindong asked 2 questions in a row, his voice was cold as he said, "There is no need to reason with animals. Execute them." All the commoners and garrison soldiers could only watch as over 1,000 people were killed. Blood flowed like a river in the harbor. But for some reason, no one was afraid. On the contrary, Everyone was very excited, and many of the civilians were grateful for what the garrison had done for them. They also wanted to do something. They all expressed their desire to join the 5-star Navy. They wanted to use their own hands to avenge their loved ones and friends. Towards the enthusiasm of the civilians, the division commander Nye Tong naturally politely declined. In order to become a qualified member of the Cold Vanguard, one couldn't just rely on a moment of bravery. One had to go through extremely difficult tests and background checks. This was not something that could be done by ordinary citizens. There were also many non-human citizens who could join the Cold Vanguard. And in order to not dampen the morale of the civilians, Nye Tong said, according to what Yang Qindong had taught him, "Folks, you have not undergone specific and systematic training. You are temporarily unable to become a qualified Navy soldier. But as long as you are willing to work hard, there will definitely be opportunities in the future. Now, if you really have the heart, you can do some other work. It is also a contribution." "General, what can we do?" the commoners asked in unison. "There are many things that can be said. For example, you can help the army transport supplies, spread the news of what happened here, and let all the people on the island know that the 5-star Army is fighting for the people. You can persuade more people to help our army. When we defeat the great F country's army and reclaim the island, you can immediately rush to the island to maintain the law and order there, guard the property there, prevent the return of invaders, and prevent people from causing trouble in our rear. You can do all of this, and you can even do it. Furthermore, the Southern Marshal King will not let you do all this for free. He will give you a certain amount of reward to express his gratitude. At the same time, it will also strengthen your feelings as the masters." Nye Tong did not know if this would be useful. In his eyes, these people were just civilians. Since they were civilians, what they needed to do was to live their own lives and try not to cause trouble. How many people would do something like helping in a war? Nye Tong's idea was not unreasonable. Since ancient times, when faced with war, most people chose to retreat and escape. The people who truly had the courage to face it, or even rushed to participate, were few and far between. But Yang Qindong did not think this way. Once, when he attacked the Phnom Penh dynasty, which was the current Cambodia province, he had borrowed the power of the civilians. When he led the army to fight in the front line, it was the Phnom Penh civilians who constantly followed behind, helping them bury the bodies, transport supplies, and finally, in a month's time, they defeated a large dynasty. After that experience, Yang Qindong liked this method. Next, Yang Qindong wanted to conquer the entire F country. There were many islands, and if he had to fight and defend one place at a time, he would need to constantly divide his troops. In the end, there was a high possibility that he would not have enough troops. But if he had the help of the civilians, then it would be different. Not only could he save his troops, but he could also borrow the persuasion of the civilians. It was a method of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Commander Nye Tong's words fell into the ears of the civilians. Not long after, it also spread to the ears of many other civilians. When the garrison regiment faced the invasion of the enemy, they would rather use their bodies to block the bullets than use their cannons to harm a single civilian. This moved many people, making them believe that the 5-star Army was the army that saved the world. Naturally, the Intelligence Bureau and the Han people who moved here added fuel to the fire in the dark. But at the same time, helping the 5-star Army would give them benefits and rewards. This kind of benefit, in addition to the fact that Port Luzon did exist, made it hard for them to reject. In the following battle, these commoners indeed played an extremely important role in assisting the army. Duterte and more than 1,000 soldiers of the Dafe country were killed at the port. They avenged the dead soldiers of the garrison regiment and the people of the port, and also played the role of a flag sacrifice. Next, Yang Qindong personally led the 1st Sea Division from the north and went straight to the Ditsao Island of the Dafe country. Just as the 1st High Division received the telegram and headed towards Port Luzon, The 2nd High Division and the 3rd High Division also headed towards their respective targets. The 2nd High Division's commander, Zhao Chongwang, headed towards the west, while the 3rd High Division's commander, Long Yuntian, headed towards the east. Mindoro Island was the first island and target to be conquered on the west. On this island, there were about 5,000 soldiers of the Def country and 60,000 civilians. The largest city on the island, Mayu City, had the largest Mayu port on the island. When the 5-Star Army's flag appeared in the distance and hundreds of warships appeared, the soldiers of the Def country were dumbfounded. When the 3rd-level warships and 2nd-level warships appeared, and under the command of the division commander, Zhao Chongwang, the entire port was soon plunged into a sea of fire. The ships, soldiers, and defensive buildings left here were destroyed in a very short period of time. Before most of the civilians in the city could figure out what was going on, the 2 ND Division's main force had already begun to disembark at the port. With the support of artillery fire, they entered Mayu City after an hour, killed all the enemies who resisted, and occupied almost all the military facilities and warehouses here. From the firing to the end, less than 2 hours had passed. More than 1,000 soldiers of the Def country were killed and injured, and the rest were all captured. Under the cover of artillery fire, the entire Mindoro Island did not even have a single ship escape. Such a victory was incredible in the eyes of others, but in the eyes of the 5-Star Navy, it was so common. If there must be a word to describe it, it was like using a cannon to kill a mosquito. Compared to the well-trained and extremely advanced firearms of the 5-Star Navy, dealing with the unprepared soldiers of the Def country, from the beginning to the end, was completely crushing. There was no pride or complacency at all. After occupying this place, the first thing the 2nd Division commander Zhao Chongwang did was not to count the war gains, but to say to the dispatcher next to him, "Immediately report to the 6th Young Master and the Navy headquarters that the war on Mindoro Island is over. Please send someone to take over." In addition, the 2nd Division intends to continue south with the main force. Please give instructions. A small island like Mindoro was naturally unable to satisfy the appetite of Division High and Division High, so it was expected that they would continue to fight. Not only did Division High and Division High act this way, Division 3 Long Yuntian's subordinates also quickly reported to Yang Qindong and the Navy headquarters to continue to fight. Long Yuntian was favored by Yang Qindong and finally became the head of the 3rd Division as he wished. He would do his best to prove that the 6th Young Master did not misjudge him. In his eyes, this battle was the time to perform well. So, after receiving the order, he led the 3rd Division Commander High Strait to Katanduane's Island. Due to the distance, the time taken to launch the attack was not as fast as the 2nd Division. However, from the moment they entered the island to the moment they fired the cannons, it only took them 2 hours. This was not because the combat power of the 3rd Division was stronger than that of the 2nd Division. Instead, it was because Catanius Island was too weak, so the speed of their attack was much faster. Yang Qindong, together with the main force of the 1st Division and the Navy headquarters, soon after leaving the port of Luzon Island, they received reports from the 2nd Division and the 3rd Division. The speed of the military progress was smoother than expected. After Yang Qindong read the report, he just casually handed it to the deputy commander of the Navy Gao Xiong and said, "With such strength they dare to go against the 5-Star Army. There's no need for this Def country to exist." It was said that the more daring a person was, the more bountiful the land would be. In Yang Qindong's eyes, Def country was not in his eyes. If it was not for the fact that he was not fully prepared, and that the resources in the islands were not that abundant and scattered, this place would not have become his early target. If there was someone to blame, it was the merchant Abu Burkle who was blinded by profit and did something that led to his own death. Since it was like this, Yang Qindong would fulfill his wish. Gao Xiong took the telegram and quickly read it. He asked, "6th Young Master, do we agree to their request?" "Yes, but we have to ask them to play it safe and not be reckless. Our intelligence department has sent news that this Western merchant is quite capable. He has also spent some effort to build a naval fleet. Any carelessness could lead to irreparable consequences. Also, inform the logistics department that the transport ships can be activated and quickly occupy the occupied islands. Yang Qindong gave the latest order. Chapter 10-11. Each team took turns to advance according to their different tasks. The war unfolded in an orderly manner, and the islands belonging to the Daf country were occupied one by one. Due to the slave system implemented by the Great F country, after occupying an island, the indigenous people became the people with the lowest status. When the Great F country soldiers entered the island, they burned and plundered and did all sorts of evil. This had already aroused the anger of the people. When the 5-star Navy arrived, these people fought to rebel and cooperated with the army's entry, making the progress much smoother. Most of the soldiers of the Daf country were bought by Abu Burkle with money, and most of them were pirates who had been at sea all year round. These people were naturally unmatched when it came to looting, but these people had one thing in common, which was that they didn't know how to write the word loyalty. In their eyes, there were only benefits. If there were benefits, they would naturally join. If there were no benefits, they would run as far as they could. With such a temperament, when the news of the 5-star Navy's attack came, many of the Daf country soldiers, former pirate groups, on the islands fled. In some small islands, they didn't even do anything to resist. When the main force of the 5-star Navy arrived, they often encountered an island that was unprepared. What they saw were the indigenous people who didn't resist at all. With such a big change in the situation, the 2nd and 3rd Naval commanders reported the situation again. Yang Qindong quickly responded. Since the local people were also exploited, as long as they sincerely submitted to Yang Xie and Song City, they wouldn't be harmed. But if anyone showed any hostility to the 5-star Navy, they would be killed without mercy. Those who are not of my race must have different intentions. After so many years of development, in the original Sulu archipelago, only the people in the Luzon area were mostly Han people. They still had feelings for the great Ming dynasty. The people in the other archipelago moved here later. They had their own beliefs, and many of them were influenced by Islam. For such a hidden enemy, Yang Qindong would never be lenient, because he knew that today's kindness may be exchanged for understanding sorrow. At the same time, Yang Qindong also issued another order. For the pirates that previously belonged to the Daf kingdom, kill them if possible. If they couldn't kill them, they had to be driven out of the sea. In short, any forces or individuals who dared to be enemies with Yang Xie must not be allowed to survive. The 5-star Marine warriors, who have always been warlike and composed of elites, are waiting to make contributions and obtain unparalleled glory. In order to achieve this goal, the worst thing was to have no battles to fight. This order coincided with the thoughts in his heart. Naturally, he would not be polite. The warship continued to accelerate. Once it bumped into the Defay Navy or the foreign pirates, it would not be polite. It would shoot out cannonballs. It did not know how many ships were damaged. The color of the sea became a lot redder because of this. The continuous victories of the First Ocean Army naturally caused some people to jump and curse. In Maralag City of MLL Island, the temporary capital of Daf country, King Abu Burkle was sitting on a throne as he pointed at the officials below and scolded. "What the hell is going on? Didn't you say that our army is composed of elite pirates who have experienced naval battles all year round? Didn't they boast to this king that if the 5-star army dares to come, they will definitely destroy them at sea? Why is it that when the real battle starts, they are so weak? Who can give this king an explanation?" As Abu Burkle spoke, his gaze landed on Ferdinand, who stood at the top of the vassals. Ferdinand, who was deeply trusted by King Abu Burkle, was given the position of Prime Minister. The main job he was responsible for was to deal with the pirates and was in charge of the military. In his bones, Abu Bakr was still a businessman. He valued profit more. Originally, with the help of his family that had been doing business for generations, he had some foundation. Doing business in this archipelago was like a fish in water. He seemed to have a pair of innate wisdom, always able to do things with appropriate things very well. To put it bluntly, he could transport the most common goods from one place to another in a very short period of time and sell them at a high price. Then, when he returned, he would bring back the specialties of the other place and sell them at a high price along the way. It was because of this unique talent that Abu Bakr's business grew bigger and bigger, and the money in his hands grew bigger and bigger. When he had enough money to build a huge army, he met Ferdinand, and the two of them hit it off immediately. Especially when Ferdinand said that he could build a country with financial resources and then use the power of the nation to collect money. Abu Bakr saw a bright path, and thus, Daft Country was born. Who knew that the good times didn't last long? When they just occupied the nearby islands, some of the looted items were still being counted. Before they could be transported out, the 5-star army came and gave them a heavy blow. News of islands and cities being looted came one after another. After spending a lot of money and bribing so many pirates to work for him, this was the result. Abu Bakr, who spent the money, was naturally very distressed. At this moment, his gaze toward Ferdinand was naturally full of hostility. Prime Minister Ferdinand, who was stared at like this, felt very wronged. He was only ordered to contact those pirates. In the end, one paid and the other contributed. It was a cooperative relationship. How could he have the ability to control these pirates? Now that they were facing a more powerful 5-star army, they cowered. What did this have to do with him? But when he thought about how Abu Bakr was a vengeful person, if he didn't react, he might be the next unlucky one. Left with no choice, he could only step forward and say, "Your Majesty, the 5-star army came prepared, but our army was completely unprepared. Unprepared against unprepared, plus the other party originally planned well. With superior military strength against our inferior military strength, how could we not lose? But as long as we can gather our army and form a similar scale, the situation will definitely be reversed. These pirates are the forces of other sea regions that have been unhindered for many years. They naturally have their own reasons for being able to dominate a region." "Oh, Prime Minister, are you saying that the 5-star army can be defeated?" Abu Bakr asked with interest. "Yes, Your Majesty. I just said that before we weren't prepared, so they took advantage of the loophole and used superior military strength to fight against a small army. But as long as we can gather our army and meet force with force, our chances of winning are still very high." Ferdinand said with a face full of confidence, "Good. Since that's the case, I order you to contact them now. Gather them and deal a heavy blow to the 5-star army. Can you do it?" Abu Bakr saw that there was a new hope, and his face immediately smiled a little more. "Yes, but I have a request. If you want these pirates to work for you, you need to give them enough rewards. So," Abu Bakr frowned slightly. Before, in order to invite these pirates to join the Great F country, he spent a lot of money. But at this point, if he didn't continue to pay, these pirates would definitely not listen to him. And once the 5-star army really came, he was afraid that at that time they wouldn't even have the most basic way to survive. He would also have to leave because of this, and that would be the same as cutting off his path to wealth. A little impatience spoils great plans. Although he wasn't happy, he still clenched his teeth and said, "All right, this king will agree to your conditions. But this time, there can't be any problems. Your Majesty is wise. Your Majesty, please rest assured. Just wait for the good news of my victory." Ferdinand let out a big sigh of relief. He was the one who contacted these pirates, so he naturally knew their temperament very well. They were a group of people who would sell their souls for money. As long as they were given enough money, they would even kill their own family without blinking an eye. It was just dealing with the 5-star army. What was so difficult about it? Ferdinand took the large amount of gold and silver given by Abu Bakr and left the capital. The first place he took the fleet to was Palawan Island in the west of the archipelago. Palawan Island was the westernmost island in the Great F country. It wasn't difficult to get there because it was far away from other islands. Once it was attacked, it could retreat or advance. It also had another advantage. There was a very powerful pirate group here, Ma Kaching's pirate group. Ma Kaching was originally a pirate giant that sailed around Sumatra. He had close to 1,000 large boats and a crew of more than 60,000 people. Among them, there were 20,000 elites who were good at fighting and desperados. It was a very powerful pirate force. When Ferdinand went to rope him in, he spent a lot of effort. Of course, he also spent a lot of money to invite him to join the Great F country and let him help guard Palawan Island and become the main force supporting the Great F country's western seas. It was precisely because of his understanding of Ma Kaching's abilities that Ferdinand had been the first to seek him out. When he landed on the island and brought with him 10 chests full of gold and silver, totaling up to 500,000 taels of silver, the pirate leader Ma Kaching's face was already beaming like a flower. "Brother Ma, this is our king's sincerity." He also said that as long as you can defeat the 5-star army, he will also give you a third of the loot. How about it? Seeing that the time was right, Ferdinand said his request. It was only a third of the loot, so it was naturally difficult to move Ma Kaching. This also made him quickly withdraw his smile and said with a very serious expression, "Prime Minister, what do you think we are? A mere 500,000 taels of silver is enough to make tens of thousands of my brothers work for you?" Chapter 10:12. Hee, Brother Ma is lacking. You probably don't know how powerful the 5-star army ships are. Let me tell you, they have the fastest power in the world. At the same time, each ship is equipped with cannons that are several times more advanced than ours. Once we defeat them and occupy their ships, it will greatly increase Brother Ma's strength. Moreover, the king said 1/3, but he isn't here. How much 1/3 is there? Isn't it up to the two of us to decide? Oh, hearing that the spoils of war were so generous, Ma Kaching was already tempted. When he heard Ferdinand's words, he smiled again. Then everything will depend on the Prime Minister? No, no. All victory will depend on Brother Ma. This time the enemy isn't weak. Don't hold back. A smile appeared on Ferdinand's face as well, followed by bursts of laughter. The two of them had reached an agreement, just like that. There were no eternal friends, no eternal enemies, only eternal benefits. When the benefits were big enough, people would take risks. Ma Kaching made the decision to fight with the 5-star army. In order to tilt the scales of victory towards here, Ferdinand used his identity as the Prime Minister of the F country to give orders to the nearby sea regions. Once the battle started, they were required to do everything possible to stop the nearby 5-star army's reinforcements. They had to buy enough time for them to destroy the enemy's main force. Regarding this, Ma Kaching didn't put it in his eyes. He said bluntly, "We have already investigated. The 5-star army's navy is divided into 3 parts. Each part has less than 10,000 people and less than 200 ships. As long as they are surrounded by us, they won't be able to escape, let alone send a message." What Ma Kaching meant was that Ferdinand's actions were superfluous. Ferdinand laughed and said, "I don't think Brother Ma's goal is so short-sighted. I arranged a few people to watch over the other 5-star army's main force. If we can destroy more enemy ships, wouldn't we gain more benefits?" "Oh, ha, that's feasible." Ma Kaching laughed heartily, as if the main force of the 5-star naval division was already present and could be easily manipulated by him. This was not his fault. He could only blame himself for the fact that the 5-star naval division was only active in the area around little Ryukyu Island. They were only passing by Sumantala. Considering their limited military strength, they had not established any influence there. Those who didn't know didn't care. Ma Keqing didn't know the strength of the 5-star Army's navy, which was why he made such a decision. But reality soon. Not all ships' navy's navy. Some power was like a sharp blade's edge. It was impossible to block off its light fleet's light. Set Ma Keqing's navy's navy. S navy's is navy's navy. S's. Among them, Ma Kusheng led the main force and appeared here. He was ready to fight a decisive battle with the 5-star army. However, he had already set up hundreds of warships and tens of thousands of bandit soldiers in the surroundings, ready to surround them. Using oneself as bait to lure the enemy over and surround them had been done many times. Ma Keqing's face was naturally filled with confidence. After arranging everything, he ordered the scout ship to leave and find the main force of the 5-star army to lead it over. The 5-star army's main force was Hai's 2nd Division. Division Commander Zhao Chongwang first raided Mindoro Island and occupied it without much effort. After that, all they had to do was wait. 3 days later, the logistics forces arrived, bringing with them countless Luzon residents and a battalion of garrison soldiers. After taking over the coastal defense of this place, the 2nd Division continued south, taking over 6 or 7 islands of various sizes, including Busenga Island. The result was the same. Because these islands were too small, it was impossible for any army to be stationed there. When Hai's 2nd Division arrived, these so-called Dafei's army either fled at the sight of them or chose to surrender after being surrounded. There was not even a decent battle. This made Division Commander Zhao Chongwang and the officials of Hai's 2nd Division very unhappy. A group of true elites had their own dignity. If the enemy couldn't even withstand a single blow, then there would be no challenge at all. For them, this kind of expedition would become a boring thing. Until the scout ship sent by Ma Keqing suddenly appeared, Zhao Chongwang, who had been dozing off, opened his eyes wide again. Division Commander, look at that flag. It's the scout ship of Ma Keqing's pirate group. Should we defeat them and feed them to the fish in the sea? 1st Division Commander Xin Xing stood in the captain's room and asked excitedly. No. Zhao Chongwang hurriedly made a hand gesture and said with a look of anticipation, I've heard that Ma Keqing's strength is not bad. It's not easy to see their scout ship. Of course, we have to follow them and find their main force for a decisive battle. Like this, pass down the order. All warships are not to fire. Just follow these scout ships. We have to find the enemy's nest and destroy them in one fell swoop. With the division commander's order, the entire 2 ND divisions, 200 warships, quickly moved. They adjusted their direction and followed behind the scout ships towards the west. Originally, Zhao Chongwang was worried that the other party was a fast scout ship. If he did not follow them closely, he would lose them. However, when Zhao Chongwang found that the other party was not going all out and seemed to be waiting for him, he suddenly had a bad feeling. At the same time, 1st Division Commander Xin Xing also felt that something was wrong. He said with concern in his heart, Division Commander, the speed of the scout ship shouldn't be this slow. Do you think they are deliberately leading us there? Originally, he had some doubts in his heart. Now that his subordinate also had the same thought, Zhao Chongwang was almost certain of the other party's plan. He nodded and said, What you said is exactly what I was thinking. It seems that the other party is prepared for a decisive battle with us. Hee, that's exactly what I was thinking. Tell the fleet to slow down and keep a sufficient distance between each ship. Be prepared to fight at any time. At the same time, report everything that happened here to the headquarters. When it came to such a big battle, Zhao Chongwang had to report it. This was originally the rule of Yang Xie's army. When this telegram was sent to the headquarters, Yang Qindong and the 1st Division had just occupied Panay Island. They were checking their harvest here. The telegram was sent to Yang Qindong and the Deputy Commander of the Navy and the 1st Division Commander Gao Xiong. Come on, find out the relevant information about Ma Keqing. Yang Qindong said casually. Beta Persei and a few others quickly sent a thick stack of information to Yang Qindong. This information was provided by the Security Bureau and the CIA. Then the CIA continued to develop, and they already had a certain intelligence system. With two departments collecting and providing information at the same time, this would enhance the authenticity of the information and provide a better reference for making correct judgments. Oh, this pirate organization is quite powerful. Looking at the information sent by the two intelligence departments at the same time, which was roughly the same. Looking at the numbers above, there were thousands of warships and more than 60,000 soldiers. Yang Qindong couldn't help but be shocked. One must know that the pirate forces were not comparable to other forces. Surviving at sea all year round made their needs greater than on land. Let's put it this way. If a force had 60,000 people on land, it wouldn't be surprising. If it was done well, even a county magistrate could do it. But to have such a huge force at sea, the resources needed were too much. It was enough to show that this was not a small force. Gao Xiong also saw this group of forces, then said worriedly, "Sixth young master, enough ants can bite an elephant to death. In the face of such a strong enemy, I'm afraid that even if C 2nd Division wins, they will have to pay a certain price. It's better to send reinforcements immediately." Reinforcements are needed. Yang Qindong nodded in agreement. Although he was confident in C 2nd Division, with the power of their warships and cannons, as long as they were not ambushed in their sleep, they would have the ability to break out of the encirclement. But just passively taking a beating was not his style. The establishment of each C Division used a lot of financial and material resources in Reiken City. Any loss would make him feel distressed. How about this? Send a telegram to the C 4th Division patrolling the nearby sea area. Let them quickly approach C 2nd Division. Don't let them meet up first. Once they find that the enemy is surrounding them, attack them from both inside and outside. One C 2nd Division and one C 4th Division. With such a force, even if they were facing a force several times stronger than them, they would still have the ability to counterattack. Yang Qindong gave the order, and Gao Xiong nodded in agreement. Then he asked, "The enemy has already made their move. 6th young master, I think we should also hurry up. Everything on Panay Island will be left to the garrison and the people. Should we continue to move forward?" Yes. Yang Qindong nodded silently, and his eyes fell on MLL Island on the sand table. This time, Daft Country went to war without declaring war, killing and injuring so many soldiers and people. If they did not teach them a lesson, wouldn't they be looked down upon by others? Wouldn't anyone dare to provoke them in the future? C 1st Division set sail again, and the fleet headed south. Thousands of nautical miles away in the west, at this moment, ships were also densely packed. The tense atmosphere before the war appeared on every pirate's head, indicating that a life-and-death battle seemed to be about to begin at any time. Compared to the tension of the soldiers below, Ma Keqing, as the leader, was very relaxed. In his opinion, with more than 6 times the number of troops and 5 times the number of warships, the 5-star army had already become his meal, the meat in the bowl. At this time, he consciously ignored 2 problems. Chapter 1013. First, the strength of the 5-star Navy. Second, the 5-star Navy has an external communication system that he can't understand at all. He thought that after encircling the 5-star army, the other side will become a lone army. He thought that with the advantage of warships and numbers, the other side will not be his opponent. But he didn't know that at this time, the 2nd C Division has already contacted the 4th C Division regarding the decision of the 6th young master and the Navy headquarters to send the 4th C Division to join forces with them. Although Zhao Chongwang has some resistance, he thinks that the 2nd C Division can win. But considering that the number of warships is not equal, once the other side is defeated, they will likely escape. When he can't chase after them, he still agreed with this decision. It's just that Zhao Chongwang thought of the 4th Sea Division as a peripheral force. He didn't think of cooperating with them. He wanted to let the 2nd Sea Division have their own military achievements. And all of this changed because he entered the encirclement. After discovering that the enemy's scout ship was deliberately luring them into the encirclement, Zhao Chongwang ordered all the warships to slow down their marching speed and maintain a good alignment. In the end, 3 days later, the 2nd Division, which was tailing the scout ship, finally found the densely packed enemy ships waiting for them on the opposite side of the sea. Looking from afar, there are no less than 400 warships. This powerful lineup fell into Zhao Chongwang's eyes, but he didn't have any fear. Instead, he was very excited. Finally, there is a piece of fat meat in front of him. He can eat to his heart's content. But what happened next changed Zhao Chongwang's plan of eating alone. After the 2nd Sea Division entered the ambush, a large number of enemy ships appeared in his north, east, and south. No matter which direction he looked at, there were about 200 enemy ships. This is 5 times his own strength. In the face of such a situation, Zhao Chongwang first had a fierce struggle in his heart. Then he quickly made a decision. He called the telegraph operator and said, "Report the situation in front of us to the 6th Young Master and the Navy headquarters. At the same time, inform the 4th Division of the Sea that all the enemies have appeared. They can move now." Division Commander Shan Xing, who was accompanying the 1st Sea Division, shouted, "Our 2nd Sea Division can eat these enemies. Why are we still asking the 4th Sea Division for help?" The hidden meaning in Shan Xing's words was, why did they have to give half of the credit to others? Regarding this question, Zhao Chongwang's answer was, "The fat meat is too big for us, 2nd Division High, to eat it. If we ask 4th Division High for help, not only will we not eat less, we will eat more. At the same time, we can reduce our losses, so why not?" As the division commander, Zhao Chongwang had absolute authority over the military affairs of the 2nd Division. Immediately, he had the telegraph operator issue the order. What he didn't expect was that not only did he receive news that the 4th Master Teacher had agreed to make a move, he even received praise from the 6th Young Master. The general gist of the telegram was that Zhao Chongwang had always looked at the big picture and had truly integrated sincerity and unity into actual combat. Very good. The 6th Young Master was very happy and personally rewarded Commander Zhao with a box of Bugnam of Gojosian cigarettes and 100 jars of good wine. Considering the quantity of cigarettes produced, cigarettes became one of the most sought-after goods. Because of the high consumption, even the generals in the army received a monthly quota. As for the Wunan Ace brand that had just been released, it was the best among them. It was not inferior to the influence of the current Zhonghua cigarettes. A box of cigarettes and 100 jars of good wine were given out at once. This kind of reward was sent to the entire Yangxia army through the telegram. Remember, it was the entire Yangxia army. It wasn't limited to the 1st Division High, nor was it limited to the entire navy of the 2nd Division High. As long as one was in the Yangxia army, they were notified of this news. For a moment, while everyone was envious of these benefits, they were even more envious of 2nd Division Commander Zhao Chongwang. To be able to receive such a reward from the 6th Young Master, needless to say, he had already been taken seriously. It could be imagined that, in the future, he would have a meteoric rise. Why did Yang Qindong do this? It was very simple to say. He used this proof to tell all the senior officers how important it was to be united. As long as you have the big picture in mind, even if you didn't achieve much, you would get more points than if you acted alone. Zhao Chongwang was shocked by this telegram, but soon he was very excited. But when the excitement passed, he began to ponder the meaning of this matter. So, after he thought it through, 2nd Division High didn't immediately counterattack. Instead, they continued to drill into the middle of the encirclement. Since he already knew that he was surrounded, it was equivalent to knowing the opponent's plan. Zhao Chongwang wasn't in a hurry. He wanted to wait and see, not to see if the opponent had any tricks up their sleeves, but to buy time for 3rd Division High to reach the designated target. 2nd Division High was surrounded, but they didn't immediately escape. Instead, they continued to move forward, towards the center of the battlefield. This also made Ma Keqing, who was about to give the order to attack, hesitate. This also made Prime Minister Ferdinand, who was following the army, unable to understand. Shouldn't a normal person run away immediately when encountering such a situation? If they didn't enter the center of the encirclement, even if they had to pay a big price to escape, there was still hope for them to break through. But once they entered the center of the battlefield, even if they wanted to escape with a ship, it would be harder than ascending to the heavens. The 5-star army knew this, but why were they still so close to the center of the battlefield? Puzzled, the two gathered together to think about it, because if they didn't understand this problem, they would never be at ease. Very quickly, the two of them came to a consensus. The reason Teacher Hai's 2nd Regiment did this must be due to their arrogance. In other words, the 5-star army was very arrogant. They probably didn't think highly of these pirates, so they dared to take the risk. It was no wonder that the two of them thought this way. According to the information obtained from the scout ship that followed 2nd Division High, ever since they discovered each other, 2nd Division High ships didn't leave. Then, after 3 days of pursuit, 2nd Division High ships had already entered the encirclement. Faced with this extremely accurate information, it could only mean one thing. 2nd Division High didn't have any reinforcements, and they didn't have any reinforcements. If this wasn't arrogance, then what was it? Haha! Everyone says that the 5-star army is very strong, but I haven't seen it yet. Now I see their arrogant side. Very good. Since they don't put others in their eyes, then don't blame me for being merciless. Use the flag to tell the other ships not to be in a hurry to attack, and let the enemy move. At the same time, shrink the encirclement and wait for the enemy to appear in the center of the battlefield before attacking together. Ma Keqing was furious. He was angered by the arrogance of 2nd Division High. In the past, whenever an enemy was surrounded by him, which one of them didn't panic? They would flee in a hurry, and it would be difficult for them to even display 50% of their usual strength. However, 2nd Division High actually did the opposite and didn't put his encirclement in their eyes. Since it was like this, why would he be polite? He would just give them a good beating. After the order was given, 2nd Division High unhurriedly moved towards the center of the battlefield under the encirclement of thousands of ships. During this period, their speed was very slow, but they kept moving forward, so the pirates didn't have any other ideas. In any case, it was impossible for them to go out and report. Since that was the case, why should they worry about them escaping? Thus, the next half of the day passed in this kind of dawdling. 20 hours later, the 4th Division High sent a message that they had arrived at the designated location. They could enter the battlefield at any time after 2nd Division High fired their first shot. The 2nd Division High's commander, Zhao Chongwang, ordered the entire division to prepare for battle. In these 20 hours, other than the necessary personnel on duty, the rest of the 2nd Division Cold Front officers and soldiers were resting and sleeping in their cabins. But all the veterans knew that the more the battle, the more it was important to maintain enough physical strength. Only in this way could they perform better on the battlefield. After 20 hours of rest, the officers and soldiers were full of spirit and energy. The moment the division headquarters gave the order, the 4 regiments immediately separated, with the division headquarters as the center, guarding the east, south, west, and north, guarding the 4 directions. This was called the 4 directions defensive formation, and it was often practiced during exercises. But this was the first time it was used, and it was also the first time in the history of the 5-star Navy that a division was surrounded. The 4 directions defensive formation was completed in less than half an hour. When the pirates more than 10 miles away discovered their abnormality and began to approach them, the 4 regiments were ready to attack. As the 2nd Marine Division, which was composed entirely of cold front soldiers, other than the transport ships, All the ships were equipped with 100mm mortars. The advantage of this cannon was that it was small, easy to carry, and easy to move. It could be placed at the bow, middle, or stern of the ship, and could be adjusted according to the direction of the enemy. Moreover, the shortest attack range was 13 miles, and it could be used to kill enemies from a long distance. As for the divisions, they were equipped with 5 level 4 warships. Among them, there was one for the division headquarters and one for each of the 4 regiments. All of the Class 4 warships were equipped with Type 61 100mm single-barreled naval cannons. Firing rate 12 rounds/minute, range 22. 5 kilometers against the sea, 14 kilometers against the air, elevation 85 degrees, weight 15. 9 kilograms, muzzle velocity 895 meters per second. This type of 100mm naval cannon was produced after Yang Qindong took out the finished product from the warehouse, and the Crimson City shipyard gathered countless manpower and resources to research it for 3 years before they succeeded. This type of naval cannon could fire up to 45 nautical miles away and was currently the strongest cannon developed by the Crimson City shipyard and munitions factory. Chapter 1014. With the production of the 100mm single-barrel cannon, the shipyard and munitions factory in Crimson City also mastered more high-end technology. It is conceivable that under the promotion of Yang Xie's books and knowledge, more and more advanced cannons will be introduced in the future. On the Level 4 warship, where Zhao Changwang was on, there was a 100mm single-barrel cannon at the moment. At this time, the cannon barrel was aimed at the pirate group rushing towards them, eager to fire. Report the distance. Zhao Changwang picked up the advanced binoculars used by the division commander in his hand and looked at the sea in the distance while asking. Reporting to division commander, the enemy ship is 10 nautical miles away from us. Wait a little longer. When he heard the distance of 10 nautical miles, Zhao Changwang put down the binoculars and said in a leisurely manner, although the distance of 10 miles was within the range of all artillery fire, Yang Qindong still didn't give the order to attack immediately. He already learned from the intelligence that the strongest artillery in the West only has a range of 3 miles. As long as they fire outside this range, the initiative is still in their hands. Moreover, once they start fighting, facing such a powerful artillery, Zhao Changwang can't predict how the other party will react. What if they can't withstand the force and turn around to escape? If they run and run, it is very likely that they will rush out of the range of the 100mm mortar 13 miles. If this is the case, relying only on the cannons of the 4 level 4 warships, the effect won't be too good, so he has to wait a little longer. Reporting to division commander, the enemy ship is 8 miles away from us. Reporting to division commander, the enemy ship is 6 miles away from us. Order all ships to aim at the target and fire. After hearing the distance of 6 miles, Zhao Changwang didn't hesitate anymore. If he doesn't fire now, it will give the enemy a chance to rush in front of him. Once the enemy can suppress him with artillery fire, the loss at that time is inevitable. After the order was issued, the command flag fluttered on the strings of the division headquarters. Then the first cannonball was fired. It was the level 4 warship that Zhao Changwang was on. The cannonball whizzed out of the barrel, landing directly in the midst of the approaching pirate ships. Boom! The cannonball whizzed out. Since it had already locked onto its target, it was the first to hit its target. It hit a large ship among the pirate ships with more than 300 people on board. Then it was lit up with flames and ammunition splattered in all directions. The pirate ship, which was completely unprepared, was hit. The hull of the ship began to crack, and countless crew members were killed or injured by the explosion. Miserable screams rose and fell in succession. This hellish scene was just the beginning. Following that, countless cannons roared and countless shells flew out of Division High's warships, rushing towards the enemy ships 6 miles away. Some of the cannonballs were very accurate and could easily destroy an enemy's small warship with a single shot. Some of the cannonballs were not accurate and would cause a huge wave when they landed on the surface of the sea, causing the nearby pirate crew members to cry out in fright, their eyes filled with fear. As pirates, they were used to threatening others, robbing others, and then watching others show fear in the face of danger. However, when everything was about to happen to them, they realized how dangerous it was. They realized that their qualities were not much better than those who had been robbed before. In fact, some of them were even worse than those who had been robbed before. Cannonballs sounded one after another without any signs of stopping. Although the speed at which Crimson City's munitions factory produced cannonballs was still very slow, it had been 6 years since the establishment of the Navy. It had been nearly a year since the successful development of the cannonballs. There hadn't been any major battles, so the stockpile of cannonballs was still very large. It wouldn't be a problem to use them for several large-scale naval battles. Cannonballs continued to roar. In the depths of the pirate ships, the confidence on Ma Keqing's face had long disappeared. He was loudly asking about the distance between him and the 5-star army. He couldn't believe it. How could the enemy fire a cannonball from such a distance and hit him? All of this was beyond his imagination. To be able to dominate a region and become a pirate organization that Abu Bakr didn't hesitate to recruit, Ma Keqing was very confident in himself. Every day, he saw scenes of the strong devouring the weak. He clearly understood the importance of weapons. For this reason, he didn't hesitate to buy cannons from a passing Western fleet at a high price. Those cannons could fire up to 2.5 miles away. It was definitely a very powerful weapon at that time. Although he also knew that some Western fleets had cannons that could fire up to 3 miles away, he also knew that they would never sell them. Otherwise, wouldn't it mean that they had the possibility to threaten the enemy? But even if it was 3 miles away, once it encountered his wolf pack tactics, it was destined to end in failure. Before the battle, he thought that the 5-star army's cannons could only fire up to 3 miles away. It was because of this that he dared to mobilize all of his forces to surround the enemy. But he didn't expect that the enemy would fire from 6 miles away and give him such a heavy blow. Moreover, it didn't seem like there was only one cannon, but countless. This result made Ma Keqing somewhat unable to accept. At this moment, he was already regretting his decision to become enemies with the 5-star army. Prime Minister Ferdinand, the special envoy sent by Abuber, was also unable to accept it. He had come here to see how the 5-star naval division was surrounded and annihilated, not to see how they were defeated. So when he saw that the enemy had already fired and started to damage the pirate ships, he couldn't help but ask Ma Keqing, "Brother Ma, why didn't you give the order to return fire?" Ferdinand was a civil official after all, so he naturally didn't have a certain understanding of the cannons on the ships. In his opinion, the more ships the pirates had, the more cannons they had. Since the enemy had already fired, all they had to do was return fire. At most, both sides would suffer. Ma Keqing, who was already in a bad mood, saw that Ferdinand dared to question him and immediately said with a face full of anger, "Return fire? Our cannons can't hit the enemy at all. How can we return fire?" "What? Don't tell me that the 5-star army's firearms are already so advanced?" Ferdinand finally understood and casually said a sentence to remind Ma Keqing. Previously, he said that to the pirates, the greatest benefit wasn't the 500,000 taels of silver given by King Abu Bakr, but the powerful firearms and cannons of the 5-star army. Regarding this, Ma Keqing heard it, but didn't pay much attention to it. But now he finally understood the meaning of the sentence, and a bold idea spontaneously rose. "Haha, the enemy's cannons are really good. If I can use them, then won't I be able to casually attack the Western merchant ships passing by here? When that time comes, won't my wealth be inexhaustible?" As if he was asking himself, and also as if he had sunk into a crazed state after a burst of laughter, Ma Keqing suddenly turned around and shouted to his subordinates beside him, "Use the flag to tell everyone. Don't be afraid of the enemy's cannons. charge forward bravely. As long as we can advance 3 li, victory will belong to us. When that time comes, we will have even more powerful cannons. When that time comes, no one in the sea area will be our match." Ma Keqing's shout also stimulated his subordinates, and they shouted loudly as they went out to spread the news. This gave direction to the pirate ships that were already in chaos. To be able to become pirates and survive, well, this originally proved that they were superior to ordinary people. Not to mention, for a great pirate like Ma Keqing, to be able to organize a formation of 60,000 men, it was enough to prove his strength and the strength of his subordinates. Initially, facing the sudden attack of the Second Sea Fleet, they were indeed stunned. That was because they were not prepared and did not know that there were cannons that could shoot so far. In addition, Ma Keqing did not give any new orders, so they could only wait in panic. Now that there was a new order, some ships quickly adjusted their direction and continued to move forward despite the danger of being hit by the cannons. At this moment, through the binoculars, one could even see the red faces of many people. It was the face of someone who would do anything to achieve their goal. It was the face of a desperado. Reporting to the division commander, after the initial panic, "The enemy has begun to approach us." A division commander on the same ship, Shen Xing, put down his binoculars and looked at the division commander, Zhao Changwang. Zhao Changwang was also shocked by the opponent's fearlessness. But to be able to become the division commander of the Cold Vanguard, which one of them was not a person with an extremely strong mentality. After a moment of sighing, he ordered all warships to adjust their direction. Be sure to control the enemy's warships 3 li away. Not only did he want to win, he also wanted to not suffer any losses. This was where Zhao Changwang's ambition lay. Although it was said to be ambition, under the advantage of powerful cannons, who could say that this was an impossible task? The Second Sea Fleet began to change their target. They began to fire at the ships that were trying to get close to them. For a time, within a distance of 4 to 5 li, gunfire filled the sky. One after another, enemy ships were sunk. On the vast sea, countless small black dots floated on the water, calling for help from nearby ships. Compared to some other forces, pirates seemed to be more fearless of death. Even if the ships in front of them were sunk one by one, there were still more ships coming one after another behind them. They were like a one-track mind. Once they set their sights on their target, they would never let go, even if they knew that it was very dangerous. A fluke mentality existed in everyone's heart. They seemed to believe that they would be one of the ships that would be lucky enough to reach the 5-star admiral. Therefore, everyone was taking risks, and everyone was facing failure. Chapter 10:15. Everyone advance. I don't believe that they can defend so well. On the pirate ship, Ma Keqing's eyes were red with anger. It wasn't because of lack of sleep, but because he was anxious and impatient. Ma Keqing had experienced hundreds of battles in his life. Some of them were as dangerous as today's battle, so he was still betting. He bet that with the advantage of numbers he could win in the end. However, all of this was disrupted and defeated by another piece of news that came out of nowhere. All the pirate ships continued to advance according to his orders, especially the fast scout ships. Although they didn't have any offensive capabilities, they had the advantage of being extremely fast. Once such ships appeared, it was really difficult to be targeted by the cannons. They became the first pirate ships to reach the 3-mile mark. Finally, there was a ship that entered the 3 li radius. This was equivalent to giving the other pirate ships a shot in the arm. For a time, the other ships were influenced by this and also madly accelerated. It was as if they wanted to rely on their numbers to win. But at this moment, when their hearts were filled with hope, suddenly a large number of cannons roared behind them. Then, more ships with the 5-star red flag joined the fray. They were the Sea's 4th Division that was ordered to come to the rescue. At the beginning of the war, The C's 4th Division was ordered to patrol this area to prevent people from taking risks and attacking the coast of Cambodia that had just been conquered by Yangtze. It was because of the special position of the C's 4th Division that Yang Qindong gave them the opportunity to participate in the war. When he received the order, the commander of the C's 4th Division, Ding Yen, was naturally very excited. He immediately left the 4th Division to continue patrolling, while the other 3 divisions and a division's battalion headed straight for the designated area. The cooperation of the C's 2nd Division bought them time, and they finally arrived in time for the battle. They finally appeared when the battle was at its climax, and then they dealt a heavy blow to the unprepared pirate ships. The sudden appearance of the C's 4th Division caught the pirate ships off guard. When the cannons fell again, the pirate ships were horrified to find that it wasn't the enemy that was being surrounded, but themselves. What was even more frightening was that the 5-star Army's ships had appeared out of nowhere. Their cannons were spreading out in a very irregular manner. They had actually discovered that there was no safe zone in this area of the sea. Unlike the previous Naval Division High's 2nd Naval Division, they first attacked the leading ships of the pirate ships, then attacked the ships that wanted to come within 3 miles of them. This way, as long as they didn't charge at the front, they wouldn't be in danger of being hit by the cannons. This was also the reason why a large number of pirate ships didn't panic. The appearance of Hai's 4th Military Division broke this rule. When no area was safe, some people with weak wills began to waver. Not all of the 60,000 pirates were elites. Only 20,000 of them were truly loyal to Ma Keqing. The remaining 2/3 were only here to make up the numbers and temporarily find a place to stay. Such a person would naturally have no problem fighting a smooth battle. But once they encountered a serious obstacle, their mentality would collapse at any time. Just like when Hai's 4th Military Division suddenly appeared and gave a heavy blow, the mentality of many pirates began to collapse. The direct result was that some of the more courageous people, those who valued their lives, suddenly separated from the group of pirate ships and directly fled to the distance. Some things can be contagious, just like on the battlefield. When everyone is rushing to advance, as a member, you will consciously or involuntarily follow them. On the contrary, if someone starts to flee, your brain will also be affected. Under the herd mentality, you'll even have the same reaction and turn around to escape. Even more people don't know why they fled. You are like the current situation on the surface of the sea. Once the first pirate ship escapes, there will be a second, a third, a fourth, until there are more and more of them, affecting the mentality of more people and more ships. The sudden appearance of the escaping ships in the army and the trend of more and more ships appearing. This scene was seen by Ma Keqing on the command ship. He had a very bad feeling. It must be said that he had seen this kind of thing many times, but usually it was the enemy escaping. This was the first time that his subordinates had escaped. He, who had no experience in dealing with this, actually didn't know what to do now. On the other hand, Ferdinand, who was following the army, saw that there were ships that were about to escape and immediately said angrily, "Quick, stop them, sink them. No matter what, we can't let this situation spread, or else it will destroy our army." Yes, yes, immediately do, as the Prime Minister said. Ma Keqing, who was reminded, also thought of something. He wasn't afraid of the ships escaping, but he was afraid that everyone would follow suit. If that happened, he would quickly become a commander without an army, and that would be really dangerous. Therefore, the pirates who had been beaten up finally had the chance to fire their cannons. However, their target wasn't the 5-star Army's naval division, but their own people. The sound of the cannons rang out, hitting the escaping ships one after another. This scene was tantamount to a resounding slap to the other people's faces, which was equivalent to telling everyone that the consequences of fleeing in the face of a battle were tragic. This method of killing the chicken to warn the monkey had a certain effect, and for a moment, the wind of fleeing in the face of a battle was suppressed. This chaos gave the 2nd Sea Division a chance to counterattack. Originally, Some of the ships were already 4 miles away, and it looked like they would be a threat if they continued to charge forward. First, there was the sudden arrival of the 4th Sea Division, which attracted the attention of the other party. Then, there were some pirate ships that wanted to escape, which shook the pirate army's determination to attack. Under these 2 sudden changes, the pirate ships' speed slowed down. The only ones that really rushed over were the scout ships that didn't have cannons and were closer to the enemy. Ships like these that came alone couldn't pose any threat to the 2nd Sea Division at all. Every 5-star Army's battleship only needed to send a squad of soldiers armed with the Type 95 to close in and strafe. Facing the pirates, who were still armed with bows and arrows after a few rounds, more than half of them were killed. They didn't even have the chance to shine before they were completely annihilated. Taking advantage of the delay in the enemy's attack, the 2nd Sea Division's cannons began to extend and unceasingly fired shells. Together with the 4th Sea Division, they attacked the pirate ships from the front and back. Finally, there wasn't a single safe spot left on the battlefield. Countless pirates could only watch helplessly as their companions' ships were struck and sunk into the sea. As they screamed for help, the fear in their hearts grew stronger with each wave. Finally, the matter of fleeing once again occurred. This time, the number of ships that escaped was much higher than the previous few. There were dozens of ships and even hundreds of ships. When it became a general trend, the so-called stopping would no longer play a decisive role. There were even some ships that took the initiative to open fire on the pirate ships that tried to stop them from escaping. Thus, the internal strife began. When everything entered Ma Keqing's eyes, he knew that it was all over. Seeing his ships being sunk at every moment, or being hit by the 5-star army, or being hit by his own people, his many years of hard work suffered a heavy blow today. His face was extremely ugly. At this moment, Ferdinand's voice came from the side. "Brother Ma, this can't go on. We have to think of a way." A way? If he didn't hear this sentence, he wouldn't be so angry. After hearing this sentence, Ma Keqing's eyes spat out flames of anger. "It's all because of you? If it wasn't for you, my army wouldn't have suffered such heavy losses. Tell me, how are you going to compensate me?" Compensate? Didn't we already give you 500,000 taels of silver? Now that we haven't dealt a heavy blow to the 5-star army, even our king can't give you any more benefits. Ferdinand shook his head and spoke the truth. At this moment, he didn't know what kind of consequences these words would bring him. 500,000 taels? My losses are so great. Is 500,000 taels of silver enough to compensate for them? Let me tell you, give me another 1,000,000 taels of silver. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. His face was full of anger, and every word seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. 1,000,000? No. Even if you kill me, you won't get it. Ferdinand heard Ma Keqing's demand and shook his head continuously. Is that so? Then I'll kill you. Men, kill this culprit in public. Ma Keqing, who was in a fit of anger, said without any trace of politeness. Once the order was given, 2 pirates walked forward, one on the left and one on the right, and carried Ferdinand out of the cabin. Ma Keqing didn't even look at him, but used a decisive tone to say to the flag bearer beside him, "Pass down the order, retreat. All troops retreat towards the Sumatra Sea." This was the saying of a brave warrior cutting his wrist. Knowing that they weren't a match for the 5-star army, they would just flee. Wasn't there an old saying, where there's life, there's hope? The scene of cannon fire was still playing out on the sea. Once the order to retreat was given, the situation became even more chaotic. The pirate ships were like street rats that everyone wanted to beat, frantically fleeing in all directions. This was the so-called "a defeated army collapses like a mountain." Continue the cannon fire. Kill as many as you can. Seeing the enemy ships in chaos, not thinking of attacking but instead fleeing, the commander of the Sea 2nd Division, Zhao Chongwang, decisively gave the order to extend the cannon fire. Immediately, the cannons that were originally aimed at the enemy ships in front of them began to extend, blasting towards a distance of 6 li. They originally thought that, since they were far away from the 5-star army, there wouldn't be any danger. At this moment, they realized that the enemy wasn't using their full strength. Seeing the enemy's cannons smash one after another onto the warships beside him, Ma Keqing's face changed again. Originally, he wanted to maintain the formation and retreat, but now he couldn't care less. Ignoring the people around him, he turned the ship around and fled. Chapter 10:16. Naval battles were different from land battles. It wasn't as if you could just aim at a target and it would be difficult for the enemy to escape. Just like now, as Ma Keqing's ship continued to accelerate and change direction, it was very difficult to lock onto him. As for chasing after him, it was even more impossible. This area of the sea was filled with destroyed ships. There were also some ships that surrendered because they were too cowardly. They blocked the way and also blocked the 5-star army's path to chase after Ma Keqing. Ma Keqing escaped, and the battle finally ended before the sky turned dark. This battle on the ship, which lasted for more than 10 hours, had greatly destroyed the strength of this pirate leader. According to the post-battle statistics, there were more than 300 ships that were destroyed in this battle. There were about 100 ships that collided with each other during the escape. About 300 ships surrendered, but there were less than 300 ships that actually escaped. Moreover, they escaped in all directions. In the end, there were only 200 ships that escaped with Ma Keqing to his old base in Simintala. This battle established the foundation of the 5-star army's invincibility at sea. As the escaping ships continued to spread the news, not long after, all the forces at sea knew that the 5-star army had a type of cannon that could attack from a very long distance. From then on, wherever the 5-star army appeared, the enemy would flee at the sight of them and not dare to fight. When the sky turned dark, the 2nd and 4th Naval Division's telegrams of victory were sent to Yang Qindong. Good. Commendation, commendation. Yang Qindong's face revealed a carefree smile when he saw that Hai's 2nd Division and Hai's 4th Division were unscathed. The vice commander of the Navy, Gao Xiong, also had a proud smile on his face. 6th Young Master, this is all thanks to our advanced weapons. Yes, knowledge is power. This is the perfect embodiment. If it weren't for the combined efforts of the munitions factory and the shipyard, we wouldn't have been able to achieve such a great victory. How about this? At the same time, send a telegram to the Crimson City Palace and the city Lord's Mansion to commend the researchers in the city. Taking advantage of the situation, Yang Qindong intentionally raised the value of the intellectuals. Regarding this, the other officers naturally did not have any doubts. Facts spoke louder than words. In this battle, the advantage of advanced weaponry was perfectly demonstrated. They should be commended. When the news of the battle outside of Palawan reached Crimson City, there was a sudden surge of technology. Many ambitious youths applied for the first academy of the Yang family in Crimson City, hoping to learn some advanced knowledge so that they could serve Yangtze in the future. The consequences of this battle weren't limited to this. Hundreds of pirate ships fled to various places in panic. The news of the 5-star Army's naval artillery being abnormally powerful quickly spread out. Some of the forces and organizations that originally wanted to compete with the 5-star Army became hesitant. In particular, the pirates who escaped deliberately began to exaggerate the power of the 5-star Army in order to prove their innocence. They took the initiative to say that their artillery could hit more than 10 miles away, dozens of miles away, or even hundreds of miles away. In the islands controlled by the Big F country, there were ships leaving every day to break away from the control of the Big F country. They just didn't want to be enemies with the 5-star Army and not become their next target. Taking advantage of this east wind, the 3 navies went south and subdued several islands. 10 days later, the 3 divisions of the First Sea Army appeared in the outer waters of Mll Island and surrounded the island from 3 sides. In order to avoid unnecessary losses, Yang Qindong used the strategy of encircling 3 sides and blocking 1 side. This gave the other side a glimmer of hope to prevent the enemy from fighting to the death. The Big F country's capital, Marilag City, was adjacent to Davao Bay in the future. There was a large port here where the 500 ships that belonged to Abu Bakr were docked. This was also the power that belonged to him and was also the last power in Abu Bakr's hands. The news of Ma Keqing's defeat was spread a few days ago. When he heard this news, Abu Bakr's face was full of disbelief, and then he felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. He didn't really believe the rumor that the 5-star army had artillery that could hit more than 100 miles away. He thought that this was an exaggeration. However, the fact that the 5-star army had artillery that was different from others could be proven. Who was Ma Keqing? He had joined the pirates in his youth and later on became a giant of a region. He had fought countless naval battles. If it wasn't for the powerful artillery of the 5-star army, how could they lose so quickly and so miserably? According to this, if Ma Keqing wasn't a match, then he naturally wasn't a match either. Right now, the wisest choice was to run away. However, as a merchant, Abu Bakr was filled with gambling spirit and wanted to gamble again. Abu Bakr didn't choose to leave right away. He sent an envoy to negotiate with the 5-star army. In his eyes, money was omnipotent. He wanted to use silver to buy his life. However, this time, he offered 2 million taels of silver. He didn't believe that the 5-star army wouldn't be moved. If it was any other organization or power, they definitely wouldn't turn a blind eye to 2 million taels of silver. However, in Yang Qindong's eyes, it wasn't much. At the very least, he wouldn't stop his military plans just because of this amount of silver. Since the war had reached this level, it was inevitable that he would seize the opportunity to reclaim the Big F archipelago. Facing the envoy sent by Abu Bakr, Yang Qindong harshly denounced Abu Bakr's crimes. He said that the Big F country attacking Luzon port for no reason was simply a provocation and a challenge. The 5-star army wasn't afraid of any challenge. This time, the 5-star army's revenge was extremely righteous. It was impossible for them to retreat. As the king of the Big F country, Abu Bakr, who made a mistake, had to immediately surrender and accept the trial of the dead soldiers and families of the people in Luzon. After rejecting the offer of silver taels for peace talks, the emissary returned to Mll Island dejectedly. After that, the entire island went into a defensive posture. The 500 warships in the harbor also took advantage of the harbor to hide, giving people the impression that they were sharp blades in their sheaths, ready to be drawn at any moment to take people's lives. Not only that, Abu Bakr also issued a request for help in the name of the king of the Big F country. He said that no matter who it was, as long as they could help him defeat the 5-star army, he would reward them with 5 million taels of silver. As soon as this news came out, some of the large and small forces in the nearby waters became restless. 5 million taels of silver was definitely not a small amount. As the saying goes, people die for wealth. This naturally aroused the greed of some people. The 5-star army was about to become the target of public criticism. This is not normal. This is definitely not normal. In the cabin of the War God No. 1 warship, Yang Qindong looked at the collected information from all sides and frowned. Abu Bakr's provocation this time did make Yang Qindong a little angry. However, as he took the opportunity to fight and continuously occupied many islands, his anger was not as strong as before. Instead, he had to thank the other party for giving him a legitimate excuse to send out troops. In Yang Qindong's eyes, Abu Bakr wasn't someone who had to die. He also didn't want to leave a tyrannical impression on the other forces after this battle. Giving Abu Bakr a way out would give him a better reputation. In his mind, once the negotiations broke down, the other party would have some common sense and should have fled. This way, MLL Island would be in his hands, and the war would be over. However, not only did the other party not leave, but they also showed a look of fighting to the death. Their funds even increased from the original 2 million taels to 5 million taels. With all these abnormal changes, Yang Qindong began to have doubts in his heart. As the saying goes, if things are abnormal, there must be a demon. If people are abnormal, there must be a knife. There must be something that he didn't understand. Otherwise, Abu Burkle wouldn't have chosen to defend the island and would have fled long ago. Investigate. Send a telegram to the Security Bureau and CIA members on the island. They must find out what made Abu Burkle not avoid the battle and insist on fighting to the death. Since he couldn't figure it out, he might as well give the task to someone who could complete it. Putting aside the doubts in his heart for the time being, the Deputy Commander of the Navy, Gao Xiong, asked, 6th Young Master, the 2nd Division, and the 3rd Division have sent a telegram, asking when to launch the general attack on the island. There's no need to rush. Let's wait and see if there are people who are willing to sacrifice their lives for money. If there are, we'll take advantage of this battle to finish them off, Yang Qindong said unhurriedly. He had heard that Abu Burkle had offered 5 million taels of silver for help. He wanted to see if there was really someone who would make an enemy out of him for the sake of money. If there was, such a person would definitely be a hidden danger. It would be better to eliminate him as soon as possible. Knowing that the 6th Young Master was going to fish, Gao Xiong agreed and turned around to take position. He needed to send out some small reconnaissance ships to check the surrounding waters, so that if something happened he could react in advance. Laosa's provincial capital, Wanxiang City. For a while, the provincial commander, Higuang, had been feeling uneasy. His bodyguard captain, Yan Jiang, had been missing for more than a month. Even though he had sent many people to investigate, there was still no news. His intuition told him that something must have happened. He had no choice but to report the matter to the provincial governor, Luan Shaoqin. Luan Shaoqin also knew Yan Jiang. Many times, Higuang had sent him to deliver important documents. He felt that Yan Jiang was a very upright person. His identity was also special. Luan Shaoqin felt that Yan Jiang must have discovered something. His disappearance wouldn't be so simple. Daring to attack the bodyguard captain of a Laos general. Needless to say, this was not a small matter. Luan Shaoqin immediately handed over the task to the Security Bureau's branch in Laos. Just 7 days later, the Security Bureau sent back news that Yan Jiang and the 6 bodyguards were last seen in Haiqing's residence. Chapter 1017. It had to be said that Haiqing was quite capable. Ever since Yan Jiang was killed, he had tried his best to plant a spy in the Laos provincial government. When the Security Bureau reported the situation, it just so happened that Luan Shaoqin wasn't there. The matter happened to be learned by this informant. He didn't even ask for leave and went straight to Haiqing's mansion to pass the news. After more than a month of preparation, Haiqing and Siam's special envoy, Dulalong, had made some preparations for the rebellion. According to Dulalong, Siam had already mobilized its troops, and one of them was heading towards Wanxiang City in Laos. His mission was to find a way to control Luan Shaoqin and Higuang and cause internal strife. It was also at this time that the planted informant came and reported the results of the Security Bureau's investigation. Haiqing was shocked. Dulalong, who also heard the news, slammed his right fist on the table and said, "We can't wait any longer. We have to make the first move. Okay, I'll bring people to Higuang's residence and make a move. I'll have to trouble the special envoy to make a move on Luan Shaoqin." Haiqing knew that he had no way out. If he did not make the first move, he would not be able to survive. Time was tight, and the two of them did not have time to make any more preparations. They gathered 100 men of sacrifice, and Haiqing brought half of them to General Higuang's residence. Higuang did not know anything about this. When he was in his residence, he suddenly received news that his deputy general, Haiqing, had something important to discuss with him. He Guang did not think much about this deputy general and ordered him to come in. In the main hall, Hai Qing appeared with a nervous expression. When he saw that there were 2 bodyguards in the hall, he said hesitantly, "General, regarding Captain Yan Zhang's disappearance, your subordinate has already found out the reason." Oh, hearing that it was about Yan Zhang, He Guang's expression turned serious. He then waved his hand and dismissed the 2 guards. He said, "Okay, there is no one else here. General Hai, you can tell me what happened." "General, the situation is like this," Hai Qing said as he walked closer to He Guang. "Actually, I killed Captain Yan Zhang with my own hands." As soon as he finished speaking, a sharp knife stabbed into He Guang's body, causing blood to flow out. He Guang, who had been stabbed in the abdomen, couldn't help but take a few steps back. He covered his abdomen with his hand and glared at Hai Qing. "Why? I've always treated you well. You could even say that I trusted you a lot. Why are you treating me like this?" "Humph. You can only blame your head for being too valuable. I couldn't help but be tempted. All right, today is the day you die. Hand over your life." After laughing maniacally, Hai Qing once again took a big step forward, wanting to stab at the fatal spot. However, a black hole suddenly appeared in front of him and closed in a flash. His target, He Guang, had also disappeared. This secret passage was He Guang's life-saving place. After all, he had defected to Yangxia, in the former Navy Tide Nation, who knew how many people wanted to kill him. Just in case, he had made this kind of preparation. He didn't expect it to save his life at such a crucial moment. With his target gone, Hai Qing's mind went blank. Although he didn't kill He Guang this time, He Guang was severely injured. He wouldn't be able to do anything for a while. The result was no different from killing him. Hai Qing's lips curled into a smile again. He walked out of the general's residence quietly and rushed to the barracks. As the main general, He Guang, wasn't around, Hai Qing began to gather all the generals in the army. What he needed to do next was to kill all the officers who opposed him. Without a leader, the soldiers would be powerless to resist the army of Siam. On the other side, Dou Lilong led 50 men of sacrifice to ambush Luan Shaoqian on the path he had to pass every day. When the time came, he saw a sedan approaching from afar. Standing around the palanquin were 10 soldiers in green military uniforms. Dou Lilong, who had done his research, knew that Luan Shaoqian was highly valued by Yang Qindong. He had sent the most elite soldiers, Lung Feng, to guard him. Dou Lilong didn't dare to be careless when dealing with such a person. Hence, he had prepared beforehand. He placed baskets of chili powder on the roofs along the way. Seeing that the target had entered the encirclement, he immediately blew a whistle. The chili powder flew in all directions and landed on the top of the sedan. In that instant, the 10 guards who were raising their heads were splashed with chili powder. The extremely destructive chili powder entered their eyes and noses, causing them to lose the ability to fight in an instant. Before they had the chance to open their eyes, dozens of black-clothed men surged out from all directions. After a series of chaotic slashes, the 10 guards were bathed in blood on the streets. Go. Seeing that he was about to succeed, Dou Lilong's eyes were filled with excitement. He waved his hand, and the men in black rushed to the sedan and opened the curtains. What happened next was a shocking scene. There was no one in the sedan. What's going on? There was no one in the sedan. Dou Lilong was very surprised. He stepped forward and checked carefully. When he confirmed that it was indeed an empty sedan, he had a bad feeling. He looked around and found that it wasn't a trap. He couldn't figure it out and had people clean up the scene. Then, he quickly left with his men of sacrifice. It was late at night. In the high mansion, Hai Qing had invited 17 military officers. Among them, there were 3 Laos regiment commanders. The rest were battalion commanders and company commanders. They were all people with real power. All of them had been invited to this event. Good wine and good dishes were served. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 dishes, Do Lilong rushed back and nodded at Hai Qing outside the hall. This was equivalent to a signal for him to act. Hai Qing understood and nodded. Then he coughed a few times. Then, dozens of men of sacrifice with swords appeared around the hall. They attacked without any explanation. The 17 officers who were completely unprepared and had no weapons in their hands died tragically on the spot. Up until the moment of their deaths, these officers still did not understand why Hai Qing would attack them. What was going on? The hall was still filled with the pungent smell of blood. Do Lilong had already walked in. He first looked at the corpses in the hall and nodded with satisfaction. Very good. These are the people who led the troops. Once they die, the entire camp will die. Well done. Hai Qing didn't care about this. He was more concerned about Luan Xiaoqin's death. Truth be told, although this person was very young, he was very skillful in doing things. In just 4 years, he had grasped the power of the entire Lao province in his hands. Even with Hai Qing's status, whenever he saw this person, he couldn't help but feel afraid. It was like a mountain pressing down on his head. If this person didn't die, he wouldn't have the confidence to rebel. How is it? Is he dead? He's dead, he replied in a firm tone. Although Do Lilong didn't know why there was no one in the sedan, he didn't intend to tell Hai Qing. Now was the time to rebel, and he couldn't be distracted by anything. After hearing the news of Luan Xiaoqin's death, Hai Qing heaved a sigh of relief. Then Do Lilong asked, "Did you kill He Guang?" "Killed him," Hai Qing, who also had a cunning mind, replied. He thought that He Guang wouldn't be able to recover in a short time. It wouldn't take long for the entire Laos province to change hands and become a part of Siam. If that was the case, that person wouldn't dare to show up again. What was the difference between that and being dead? Both of them kept it a secret from each other and raised their glasses to celebrate. Then they talked about the operation at night. They would attack the governor's office, the armory, the provincial storehouse, and the granary. In short, before the Siam army arrived, they had to find a way to disrupt the security of Wanxiang City. This was to pave the way for the army to attack. Hai Qing left the governor's office once again and went to the military camp. Using military matters as an excuse, he mobilized 2 battalions of 800 men to the granary. The reason why he chose to attack the granary first was because the security here wasn't high. Secondly, without food, it would be easier to cause internal strife. Hai Qing was full of confidence. After Luan Xiaoqin and He Guang were gone, he was very confident that there weren't many people in Laos who could control him. Since that was the case, it was time for him to act tyrannically and do as he pleased. There was a saying, plans can't keep up with changes. Hai Qing, who wasn't very lucky, met the chief of public security, Long Tainan. Yang Qindong had told the officers more than once that if they wanted to understand the real situation, they had to move around more. Staying in the office and listening to reports every day was a form of work, but it was still too one-sided. Only by going to the grassroots and understanding more would they be able to make the right decisions and do better work. With Yang Qindong's encouragement, those ministers and vice ministers in Resin City would often take a walk downstairs every once in a while so as to solve the problems that they discovered. This time, Long Tainan came to Wanxiang City to inspect the security. In the security work, the security at night was often the highlight. Today, Long Tainan was inspecting the security of Wanxiang City at night. Unfortunately, he met the Laotian army led by Hai Qing on the streets. When the 2 sides met, Long Tainan stopped and asked, "Which department are you from? It's so late. Why are there so many people on the streets? What's the matter?" By right, the Ministry of Public Security had no jurisdiction over the army. However, Long Tainan was a minister. Even the governor of Laos, Luan Xiaoqin, was a level lower than him. Furthermore, he was from the cold front and had responsibilities. He couldn't help but think of the worst-case scenario when he encountered something. Hai Qing was also acting without orders. He was avoiding eye contact and was noticed by Long Tainan, which was why he asked. Chapter 1018. Hai Qing was afraid that things would get out of hand. When he saw the head of Lao Province's Public Security Bureau accompanying them, his heart was pounding. Now that Long Tainan had opened his mouth to ask, he immediately thought that he had been exposed. Hai Qing, who was not mentally strong, only hesitated for a moment before saying, "We were ordered to take over the granary. Who are you? How dare you interfere with our military affairs?" Facing Hai Qing's question, Long Tainan was naturally fearless. "I'm Long Tainan, the head of the Public Security Bureau. I think I have the authority to ask you some questions." "Oh, right, you said that you were going to take over the granary. Do you have the order from the provincial government?" "Let me take a look." His instincts told him that someone was going to take over the granary at such a late hour. This in itself was very suspicious. Furthermore, Hai Qing's words gave off a sense of lack of confidence. Long Tainan was even more suspicious. After announcing his identity, he was the head of the Public Security Bureau. At this moment, Hai Qing's expression kept changing. In the past, there had been a head and vice head of the Qiqian City headquarters who had come to inspect the granary. Even the provincial governor, Wan Shaoqin, had to greet them with a smile. How could he afford to offend such people? Hence, he forced a smile and said to Long Tainan, "So it's Long Tainan. Pardon me, I'm Hai Qing, the Deputy General of Lao Province. This time, I was ordered by General Higuang to check the granary's safety. I don't have the provincial governor's order." The director of the Lao Provincial Public Security Bureau stepped forward and nodded at Long Tainan, confirming Hai Qing's identity as the Deputy General. If it was anyone else, since they were all on the same side and they were both from the military and police, they would not ask too much. However, Long Tainan was a serious person. Hearing that the other party did not have the provincial governor's order, he said, "Since you're following General Higuang's orders, you should have his order, right? Can you take it out for me to take a look?" If he had known earlier, he would have forged a fake order. However, facing Long Tainan's overbearing attitude, Hai Qing knew that he had no way out. If he said that he did not even have the general's order, anyone would be able to tell that there was a problem. Since that was the case, in for a penny, in for a pound. He would just kill him. He had brought 800 soldiers with him, while the other party only had a few dozen men. Having made up his mind, Hai Qing gritted his teeth and pulled out his sword. He then pointed it at Long Tainan and shouted, "Since when do we need to report to the Ministry of Public Security? I see that you are clearly spies. Men, capture them for this general." Hai Qing could no longer keep up the act, so he simply flipped over. When he did that, some of the Laotian soldiers instinctively pulled out their swords and faced Long Tainan and the others. For a moment, the whole street was filled with people pulling out their swords. When Long Tainan saw Hai Qing's actions, he sneered. He was almost certain that there was something wrong with Hai Qing. As for how big the problem was, they could only take him down and interrogate him. Therefore, he was fearless. His right hand went to his waist, and a pitch-black 54 appeared in his hand. "What do you want to do? Do you know that I am the head of public security of Qiqian City? If you pull out your sword against me, you are disrespecting your superior. Based on this, I can punish you." The head of public security was also stunned by this scene. When he heard Long Tainan's shout, he also shouted, "That's right. This is head of public security, who was sent by the higher-ups to check on our work. How can you pull out your swords against him? This is a serious crime. Quickly put away your swords." When the head of public security shouted, some of the Laotian soldiers immediately put away their swords. They did not know that Hai Qing was going to rebel. They all thought that tonight's operation was a normal transfer. As the head of public security of Laos province, he was a powerful figure in Wanxiang City. Almost everyone knew him. After he said that, more and more of the Laotian soldiers started to put away their weapons. Only Hai Qing was still holding his sword. At this moment his arm was trembling. "General Hai, quickly put away your sword and admit your mistake." The head of public security said unhappily when he saw that everyone else was so obedient. Only Hai Qing was still holding his sword. Seeing that everyone's eyes were on him, Hai Qing was in a dilemma at this moment. If he put away his sword, he would have to face Long Tianan's interrogation. Some things might be exposed if he asked. Hai Qing, who no longer had a way out, simply ignored the others and slashed at Long Tianan's body with his long saber. As long as he could kill this person, he would still be the one in charge here. No one would dare to question his orders. Bang! A crisp gunshot rang out, hitting Hai Qing's right wrist. The sound of the gunshot rang out, and the sword fell. Long Tianan's voice also rang out, "Take him down. This person might be a big problem." A group of public security soldiers rushed forward and held Hai Qing down. This scene was witnessed by the 800 Laotian soldiers, but no one dared to move. This was Hai Qing's mistake. He did bring 800 soldiers with him, but these people were not his soldiers. They were the soldiers of Laos province, Yangtze soldiers. When they saw a higher-ranking officer appear, they would instinctively stand aside and watch. This was because even they did not know what was going on. Long Tainan was indeed the chief of public security. He did things swiftly and decisively. An hour after Hai Qing was taken away, he was tortured to open his mouth. He found out that the Laotian General Higuang was injured and the provincial governor, Luan Shaoqin, might be dead. Send someone to the high residence to take down Du Lilong. At the same time, send a telegram to the 6th young master to report what happened here and that the Siam army is about to attack Wanxiang City. After knowing part of the truth, Long Tainan felt the importance of this matter. He sent out orders one by one. What Long Tainan did not know was that 2 days later, not only Laos province was in danger, but Cambodia province was also in danger. They were the real targets of the Siam army. Since the destruction of Jiaoji province and the establishment of Vietnam province, Siam, as a large country in the southeast, had been paying attention to the situation here. They had thought of forming an alliance to suppress the development of the Five-Star Army. However, it was hard to predict what was in a person's heart. Facts had proven that any plan that placed their hopes on others was likely to be unforeseen. When the Phnom Penh dynasty became Cambodia province, Siam knew that they had no way out. If they did not think of a way to counterattack, the Five-Star Army would attack them the next time. They did not know what kind of province they would become. Siam King Ichili was a very capable person. They had just entered the era of a big city. The era of a big city meant that the ruler of the big city had been influenced by the Khmer culture from the start. They were no longer the benevolent and approachable ruler of the Sukhothai dynasty. They were autocratic emperors who used the title of King of Gods. When Siam entered the era of a big city, be it military, politics, or the morale of the people, they were all very strong. In the past, Siam had a permanent army of 500,000 soldiers. 2 years ago, they recruited another 300,000 soldiers. Now that they had completed their training, they only needed to go through a few battles before they could be considered a qualified army. In the past few years, they had been trading with Laos province. They had made a lot of money using the geographical advantage and finally had the advantage of commanding a war. They stockpiled food, forged weapons, and waited for an opportunity. This time, when they heard that the Five-Star Army was going up against Duffei, they cited the fact that Yang Qindong was willing to cause trouble everywhere. King Ichili, who could also be called the King of Gods, sensed the appearance of an opportunity. Taking advantage of the fact that the Five-Star Army was unable to split up, Ichili gave the order to attack. In order to achieve the goal of severely damaging the Five-Star Army, General Godin led the 200,000 Siam troops up north to Wulong City and directly to Wanxiang City in Laos province. Then General Tong led the troops to the east to Sanlong City in Cambodia province. After that, they went through Wulong City to Phnom Penh City. This position was less than 400 miles away from Suing City. In order to achieve the goal of speed, before Ichili gave the order to attack, he did not even inform his ally, the Awad dynasty, to prevent the news from being leaked. Only a few generals knew about the news. When the army set off, they used the excuse of training as an excuse to hide it from Yang Xie's intelligence network. Only after Long Tainan captured Haiqing did Yang Qindong hear about it for the first time. One could not blame the intelligence network for being late. After all, reality had proven the strength of the five-star army countless times. If they did not find trouble with others, they would be thankful. Who would take the initiative to find trouble with them? However, that was the truth. The sudden attack of the Siam army caught many people off guard. Not long after the news spread, Laos and Cambodia province were in a state of emergency. Telegrams asking for help were sent to Yang Qindong one after another. The action of the Siam army was equivalent to igniting the flames of war in the backyard. This was also out of Yang Qindong's expectations. However, he did not panic. Although the intelligence report said that the Siam army had 800,000 soldiers, which was quite scary since ancient times he had always dealt with the situation accordingly. Since there was a problem, he just had to think of a way to solve it. Soon, Yang Qindong personally ordered the 5th Division of the Lu Army, the 1st Cavalry Division, and the 1st Cavalry Division of the new army in Changsha City to gather immediately. They had to prepare all the materials and equipment needed for battle and be ready to enter the battlefield at any time. They had to be ready to fight and win the battle. At the same time, Yang Qindong decided to speed up the pace of the attack. He knew that some things could not be delayed any longer. At the same time as the bad news came, there was also good news that reached Yang Qindong's ears. The Palace of Resin City had confirmed that the first Madam, Hu Yan, was pregnant and had been pregnant for more than a month. This news made Yang Qindong, who had been frowning recently, smile. Chapter 1019. After receiving the direct order from the 6th Young Master, the Security Bureau and CIB agents lurking on MLL Island began to get busy. With money clearing the way, some officials belonging to the Daf country fell one after another. Soon the truth was revealed. 2 investigation telegrams were also sent to Yang Qindong. Silver Mountain, Silver Mine. Seeing the contents of the telegram, Yang Qindong immediately laughed. He finally knew why Abu Burkle would rather die than leave the island. It turned out that a silver mountain was found on MLL Island. In Yang Qindong's memory, there were a lot of gold and silver mines on the Japanese Empire. These were recorded in history, but he really didn't know if there were silver mines on MLL Island. Perhaps these silver mines were secretly mined and transported away, so there were no records. But in any case, this was good news. Originally, he wanted to wait and see if other pirate organizations would become enemies with the 5-star army for the silver, but now it seemed that he couldn't wait any longer. The changes in Laos and Cambodia couldn't wait any longer. The silver mines on MLL Island also couldn't wait any longer. Who knew how much was mined and how much was Abu Burkle going to take away? Surround them. Divisions 1, 2, 3, and 1 each to block the southern exit of MLL Island. Without orders, don't allow any enemy ships to leave. After making up his mind, Yang Qindong wasn't going to let Abu Burkle go. He wanted to use this method to keep all the silver on the island. Yes. Gao Xiong saluted and quickly left. Then, only 2 days later, the last gap to leave the island was blocked. On the morning of the 3rd day, Hai Yijuan issued the order for the entire army to attack. For a time, the entire periphery of MLL Island was filled with the rumbling of cannons. The various defensive measures that were previously dug were also destroyed in an instant. Abu Burkle, who was still sleeping, was awakened by the sound of cannons. Then he heard bad news. After half an hour of bombardment, the 5-star army had already begun to land in the north. What happened? Didn't we prepare a large number of defensive attacks? There are also cannons hidden in the dark. How could the 5-star army land on the island so smoothly? Abu Burkle, who was wearing pajamas, grabbed the collar of Aquino, who came to report the news, and scolded him like a madman. "Your Majesty, someone must have sold out our military deployment map. As you know, there are a lot of people who know about this matter. Ever since the 5-star army besieged the island, everyone has been in a state of panic. Many of them have colluded with foreigners." Aquino, who was Abu Burkle's most trusted general, said with a bitter expression. At this moment, he really wanted to say that it wasn't because he was incompetent, but because the enemy was too cunning. Releasing his hand, Abu Burkle's eyes were lifeless. He knew that once the 5-star army landed on the island, it would be impossible for him to continue mining. If he made a mistake, it would be impossible for him to leave this place safely. "No, I can't die like this. Retreat immediately, retreat immediately." Abu Burkle seemed to have suddenly woken up. He didn't run before because he wanted to mine more silver. He wanted to use a large sum of money to attract more people to become enemies with the 5-star army and buy more time for himself to mine. However, he didn't expect that a sudden incident from the rear would interrupt Yang Qindong's plan to continue fishing. He couldn't wait any longer and finally made his move, catching Abu Burkle off guard. Abu Burkle prepared to retreat. Boxes of prepared silver were lifted from the palace and transported to the nearby docks. But when they were only halfway there, bad luck came. A large number of warships with the 5-star flag appeared from the south. Their path of retreat was blocked. Charge out a path of blood. Anyone who can open a path will be rewarded 10,000 silvers. 10,000 silvers! The enraged Abu Burkle roared loudly. He didn't want to die, and he didn't want his silver to be stolen. Therefore, he gave out the order for a large reward. As the saying goes, when there is a large reward, there will be brave men. After the reward was given out, there were indeed a few desperados who went straight to the warships at the docks. They wanted to gamble and take a gamble, but when they arrived at the docks, the scene in front of them shattered their fantasies. There wasn't a single ship in sight. They were all blown to smithereens. Without a warship, how could they escape on the sea? When the news reached Abu Burkle's ears, he couldn't help but stagger. He knew that he was too greedy this time and missed the chance to escape. But at this point, there was no point in saying anything. He called for Grand General Aquino and ordered him to gather the army and fight the 5-star army on the island. Abu Burkle and the others once again retreated to Marlag City in the royal capital. There, they gathered 30,000 soldiers and 300,000 civilians. They prepared tung oil, rocks, and other things. At the same time, they prepared 30 cannons to defend the 4 cities. It looked like they were going to fight the 5-star army to the death. It was worth mentioning that there were still 5,000 Han civilians in the city. They were the descendants of the Han people that Abu Burkle ordered to find from the various islands. At this moment, these people became his life-saving chips, as well as his final bargaining chip with Yang Qindong. When they attacked Port Luzon, the garrison soldiers there would rather die in battle than fire a single cannon at the local people. This matter had long been reported back. Since the 5-star army was so protective of the citizens, and there were 5,000 Han citizens in the city, they couldn't possibly attack their own people, right? When Abu Burkle retreated to the royal capital, the already precarious outer defense of MLL Island instantly collapsed. Many generals raised the white flag, and the Hai army successfully landed at various locations. The huge MLL Island was occupied by the soldiers on bicycles in just 3 days. Many of the cities were occupied without a single shot being fired. The Daf country had only been established for a little more than a year. Without any foundation, the civilians weren't loyal and the soldiers weren't loyal. Not to mention that Abu Burkle's rule was extremely exploitative, causing him to be estranged from the local civilians. It was impossible for these people to be loyal to him. Yang Qindong took 1,000 Longwei soldiers on horseback and bypassed some important cities. On the third day, they arrived at the location of the silver mine that the intelligence department reported. It was the western part of MLL Island, known as the Cotabato area in the future. When they first arrived, they could still see a lot of local civilians shuttling back and forth. While going back and forth, they would carry pieces of silver or with joy on their faces. Impudent, surround them. Beta Persei, who was following them, saw that so many silver ores were about to be taken away. He immediately became furious and roared loudly. 1,000 Longwei soldiers in black immediately surrounded them. They looked like they would start a massacre if they didn't let go of the silver ores. Forget it, they will also be civilians under our rule in the future. Yang Qindong shook his head. For real enemies, he wouldn't be soft-hearted, but for unarmed civilians, he couldn't be so cruel. Longwei opened up a path, and the local civilians scattered like birds and beasts. Longwei took control of this place and gave a strict order. If there were any civilians spying on this place, they could only be killed without mercy. Yang Qindong dismounted and walked into the silver mine. When he saw the serious damage caused by the careless mining, he couldn't help but feel distressed. Even Beta Persei, who had never taken silver seriously, couldn't help but say, "Young master, this is too wasteful." Yes, it's too wasteful. The circulation of silver is already depleted. The more it is used, the less it will be used. In the long run, no matter how many silver ores there are, it won't be of any use. Yang Qindong nodded in agreement. At this moment, he had the idea of printing money himself. This idea wasn't a new one, but he had considered it before. It was just that time hadn't matured yet. Silver was indeed a good thing. In any era and era, it was the best thing to circulate, second only to gold bars. But why did it stop later? Wasn't it because the consumption was too great? Someone once did a survey. After a few years, 1 tael of silver would eventually be left with half a tael after constant circulation and friction. This was equivalent to shrinking wealth. In the long run, no matter how much silver there was, it wouldn't be enough for such consumption. Replacing silver with paper money was an inevitable development in the future. Today's Yang Qindong was no longer a scholar with no military power. The power in his hands was already very great, and Yang Xie's products had always been in short supply. As long as they were the first to promote it, paper money was very likely to become a circulating thing and replace gold and silver. Beta Persei, send someone to contact the nearest naval soldiers and let them seal this place. When the silver mining team appears, we can start mining. Don't waste a single cent, Yang Qindong said with heartache as he reached out and touched the mountain that had already been mined. A day later, Yang Qindong left the mine with 1,000 Longwei. Another day later, they arrived at the city of Marilag. Here, the commander of the 1st Sea Army, Gao Xiong, had already led the main force of the 1st Sea Division to make preparations to besiege and attack the city. What's the situation inside the city? In the camp 5 miles away from the city, Yang Qindong asked Gao Xiong. Reporting to the 6th young master, there are about 30,000 soldiers of the Great F Kingdom in the city. There are also 300,000 local civilians. Among them, there are also 5,000 Han civilians. When Gao Xiong said the last sentence, he was a bit hesitant. There are also Han civilians. When Yang Qindong heard this, his eyebrows slightly raised. Obviously, this result was somewhat unexpected. Yes, they are all Han people and their descendants from the entire archipelago. Perhaps Abu Bakr knows about our policies towards the common people, especially the Han people, so he intentionally prepared this move to make us hesitate. Gao Xiong was a bit angry when he said this. Obviously, he was very angry at Abu Bakr's shamelessness. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.